Hokage I can only draw S-rank rewards. Chapter 141-160. Chapter 141 Back to the village. Uzumaki Karen nodded excitedly when he heard Lei Luo's question. Yes, of course I do. Lei Luo smiled again, touched Uzumaki Karen's head, and said, then you can leave with me now. Do you have anything to pack at home? Uzumaki Karen shook his head. The family was poor and had nothing. Okay, let's go then. Lei Luo grabbed Uzumaki Karen's little hand and prepared to leave. Just then, a doctor walked out of Kusanagi Hospital, looked at Uzumaki Karen and said, why are you here? Come in with me, someone needs treatment. As he said that, he was about to reach out and pull Uzumaki Karen. Uzumaki Karen hid behind Lei Luo in fear. Only then did Dr. Kusanagi notice Lei Luo. Who are you? Dr. Sao Ren asked sharply at Lei Luo. Lei Luo smiled slightly, but did not take Dr. Sao Ren in the slightest, and replied, Konoha Elite Jonin Lei Luo, we want this child for Konoha, do you have any comments? Dr. Sao Ren was stunned when he heard Lei Luo's words, and he didn't dare to offend because of Lei Luo's identity. He could only force a smile to reply, no. No opinion, please do it sir. Lei Luo looked at the performance of Dr. Kusanagi in front of him, and turned and left with Uzumaki Karen. Uzumaki Karen looked at the figure of the man holding his hand, and there was a light called worship in his eyes. After Lei Luo left, Dr. Sao Ninja immediately turned around and ran into Sao Ninja Hospital to report what happened to the director. After hearing the identity of Lei Luo, the director of Sao Ren Hospital didn't have any idea to do anything, and said, let him go, that's it. In the hotel where he settled down, Namikaze Minato watched Lei Luo walk in with a little girl with yuhi hair, and couldn't help but wonder. So Namikaze Minato asked, Lei Luo-kun, who is this child? Lei Luo heard the words and replied, this little girl is called Uzumaki Karen, a member of the Uzumaki clan. I am going to take her back to the village. Namikaze Minato looked at Uzumaki Karen and murmured, are you from the Uzumaki clan? Then I watched Uzumaki Karen Yuhi's hair gradually become fascinated, and I didn't know what to think. Lei Luo can also guess that Namikaze Minato must have thought of Kushina, and may even recall the time when they first met at the ninja school, the days when they fell in love, etc. But Lei Luo is not that 8 trigrams person and won't ask these nonsense questions. Lei Luo looked at Namikaze Minato, who was distracted, and woke him up by saying, Minato-kun, Minato-kun. Namikaze Minato came back to his senses and said embarrassedly, I'm sorry, what happened to Lei Luo-kun? Lei Luo opened his mouth and replied, it's time for us to leave. Namikaze Minato nodded, then let's go. So the 3 of Lei Luo left the Sao Ninja village and hurried to Konoha. Namikaze Minato looked at the door of Konoha that appeared in front of him, and couldn't help but burst into tears, but in order to avoid revealing his identity, he had already used the transformation technique and put on a mask at the same time. After sighing for a long time, Namikaze Minato calmed down and turned to Lei Luo and said, Lei Luo-kun, it's inconvenient for me to go in directly through the gate. You go in first. There is a Hiraishin spell I left in the village, and I will use Hiraishin to enter later. Lei Luo nodded, and then replied, Minato-kun, after I return to the village, I will go to the Hokage office to submit the task, and I will also help Uzumaki Karen check in. You can go home and wait, I will go when I am done. Find you. Namikaze Minato nodded, and his figure disappeared instantly. Konoha Village, Hokage Building, Hokage Office. Master Tsunade, I'm back. Lei Luo opened the door of Hokage's office and said. Tsunade looked at Lei Luo who walked in and asked with a smile, oh, is there any gain in going out to investigate intelligence? After all, Lei Luo's application for leaving the village was based on the investigation of information about a mysterious organization. Hearing Tsunade's question, Lei Luo replied, I just investigated some simple information. That organization is called Akatsuki. Besides the members I knew before were S-class missing nin, this time I also learned about one. Membership. Quote. When he was in Ghost Lantern City before, Lei Luo already knew that Pain and the others went to the land of the earth to recruit people, and they were also a Bakuden, explosion-style, bloodline limit ninja, which must be Deidara in the original book. So Lei Luo went on to say, the new member is named Deidara, who was originally a ninja from the village of Iwagakure, with a Bakuden, explosion-style, lineage. Tsunade nodded after listening to Lei Luo's words. There is some information about him in this Deidara village. He should be the disciple of that old guy Onoki. I didn't expect him to join this Akatsuki. Could it be that this Akatsuki has something to do with Iwagakure village? Lei Luo shook his head gently and said, then I don't know, and I need to investigate slowly later. Then Lei Luo pulled out Uzumaki Karen, who was hiding behind him, and said, by the way, Master Tsunade, I still need you to help this child get a certificate so that she can live in the village. Uzumaki Karen also said timidly, hello Hokage-sama. Tsunade realized that there was a little girl hiding behind Lei Luo, and he said with a teasing, Lei Luo-kun, you haven't been out for a year, why did you bring back such a big girl? When Uzumaki Karen heard Tsunade's words, he immediately turned to Yuhi with a shy face. When Lei Luo heard Tsunade's words, her head was full of black lines, and she said, Master Tsunade, don't make such a joke, this child is an orphan of the Uzumaki clan, you can tell by the color of her hair. Tsunade was slightly surprised when he heard the words, are you an orphan of the Uzumaki clan? What's your name, child? Uzumaki Karen replied in a low voice, Lord Hokage, my name is Uzumaki Karen. Tsunade nodded, Uzumaki Karen, good name, you can live in Konoha village with peace of mind. Then he said to Lei Luo-kun, since you brought this child back, you should take care of it. It is not very good for the children of the Uzumaki family to be placed in an orphanage. Lei Luo replied, don't worry, Master Tsunade, I plan to let Karen live with me, she is also Naruto's sister. Tsunade waved his hand, if you have nothing to do, you can go back first. I will handle the information about this child. You have been out for so long, and it is time to go back and rest. Lei Luo didn't say anything more, and turned and left with Uzumaki Karen. After Lei Luo returned to the psychic beast shop and arranged Uzumaki Karen, he came to the door of the house where Namikaze Minato lived before. Namikaze Minato was already waiting there, and when he watched Lei Luo come over, he was a little excited, because he could see his son soon. Lei Luo also saw Namikaze Minato's eagerness and greeted directly. Minato-kun, come with me, I'll take you to see Naruto. Chapter 142-See You Father and Son. Lei Luo's plan. Lei Luo took Namikaze Minato back to the psychic beast shop. With Minato's strength, most people can't see through his transformation technique. Rin saw that Minato was vaguely familiar, but she was quite sure that he had never met the person in front of her. So Rin asked, Lei Luo-kun, who is this? After listening to Rin's question, Lei Luo replied, this is a friend of mine. He is an Anbu ninja. His identity cannot be revealed. You can call him Shining. Namikaze Minato also took the initiative to greet Rin, hello, I'm Shining. Rin smiled and replied, Flash-kun, welcome to the house. Lei Luo said to Rin, you go to prepare the meal first, today Shin-kun is staying at home to eat. Is there still Naruto at home now? Rin replied softly, Naruto is at home now, I'll call him over, and then I'll go to prepare the meal first. Lei Luo nodded, and Rin walked out of the reception room. Uncle Lei Luo, do you have anything to do with me? Naruto rushed in. Lei Luo picked up Naruto and asked with a smile, what were you doing just now? Naruto happily replied, I was playing with Karen's sister just now. Then Lei Luo pointed to Minato and said to Naruto, I called you here because this uncle wanted to meet you. He is your father's friend, and his name is Shining. Naruto heard the words and said to Minato, "Hello, Uncle Flash." "Hey, good. Naruto, you too." Minato was a little incoherent with excitement when he heard Naruto talking to himself. Naruto, on the other hand, looked at Minato curiously. For some reason, he felt that the man in front of him had an indescribable intimacy. However, the QB 9 tails inside Naruto began to feel a little restless. Minato's transformation could deceive others, but he couldn't deceive him. He couldn't remember the breath of Minato who had sealed him. And Minato also has the other half of QB 9 tails in his body, and he can also clearly feel it. But the seal in Naruto's body is still very strong now. No matter how much QB 9 tails tossed around, it didn't have any impact on the outside world. At this time, Naruto has started chatting with Minato. Although many of them are meaningless gossip, Minato is really happy. After all, apart from seeing Minato once when Naruto was born, this was the first time they met father and son. Time passed, and soon it was time for Naruto to join school. Minato has basically been outside to investigate Akatsuki's intelligence, and to find the whereabouts of the bodies of their husband and wife. Every time I come back from outside the village, I bring some small gifts to Naruto to see Naruto. For Naruto, Uncle Flash is the best person to him besides Uncle Leiluo and Aunt Rin. Leiluo is now Naruto's guardian, so he is the one who goes through the admission procedures for the ninja school. And today, it was time for Naruto Ninja to start school. Minato also rushed back from outside the village with a camera, ready to record this moment. Later, when Kushina is resurrected, you can show it to her. At school, you have to listen to your teachers and study hard. As for grades, you don't have to be the first, you just have to be happy. Minato touched Naruto's head and said. Leiluo just smiled and watched this scene and didn't say anything. Got it, Uncle Flash. Uncle Leiluo, Uncle Flash, I'm going to the school, goodbye. Naruto happily ran towards the school. Now that Minato is resurrected, Naruto has also started Jonin school. Everything is on the right track, and it is going in a good direction, and Leiluo is also a lot easier. But when Leiluo thought that there were still 100,000 white Zetsu in the ninja world, and Otsutsuki Kagaya was still sealed on the moon, he couldn't help but get nervous again. Although the current Konoha is much stronger than the original, the strength of other villages is basically unchanged, and Black Zetsu will definitely not give up the idea of resurrecting Kagaya. But right now, I don't have full confidence in whether I can deal with Kagaya with my strength. I can't think of relying on the strength of Naruto and Sasuke. In the original book, Naruto and Sasuke can successfully seal Kagaya again. Kind of plot kill. Quote. What the current ninja world will become, everything is still unknown. I have to find a way to improve my strength. The system tasks are triggered randomly, and relying on the system alone is not the way. I have to see what other ways in the ninja world can improve. I remember that in the original book, only Sage Art Chakra, Mangekyo Sharingan and Rinnegan can do damage to Kagaya. Mangekyo's words are now only Obito, Shisui and Fugaku's. Obito doesn't know where he is, and I can't dig Shisui and Fugaku's eyes. Rinnegan's words should only have the pair on Nagato's body now, but those are Uchiha Madara's eyes, which should have the backhand left by Madara, and they can't be. It seems that the only way to do it is in Sage Art. I remember that there seems to be a saying in the past life that if you can successfully integrate the Sage Art of the 3 holy places, you will get a power that is no weaker than the 6 paths fairy level. Although I don't know if it's true or not, it's still a goal. I've learned Sage Art from Shikatsu Forest now, and I'm just one step away from Mount Myoboku and Raichi Cave. Mount Myoboku's contract can be summoned by Minato, but it will also expose Minato, so he still has to find Jiraiya. In Raichi Cave, we can only go to Orochimaru. But Orochimaru is missing now, and Jiraiya often sends back news to the village, so go find Jiraiya first. Leiluo has already decided what to do next. And the system seemed to support Lei Luo's idea, and even triggered a system task. Ding! Congratulations to the host for triggering the mission, the Real Sage Art. Real Sage Art. Learn the Sage Art of the 3 Holy Lands and successfully integrate. Task Reward. God Level Lottery Point *1. Very good. Looking at the system tasks in his mind, a smile appeared on the corner of Lei Luo's mouth. This task of the system shows one thing, that is, Lei Luo's plan is feasible, and the Sage Art of the 3 holy places can indeed be integrated. If you want to know the location of Jiraiya, you should ask Tsunade. She should have a way to contact Jiraiya. Lei Luo thought to himself. So Lei Luo set off and came to Hokage's office. Master Tsunade, can you contact Master Jiraiya? Or is there his current position? I have something to look for. Lei Luo said to Tsunade. Tsunade was a little surprised when he heard what Lei Luo said. What are you doing with that old bastard in Jiraiya? Chapter 143 News from Jiraiya. Back to the land of soup. Hearing Tsunade's question, Lei Luo replied, Master Tsunade, I'm looking for Master Jiraiya mainly to try if I can learn Mount Myoboku's Sage Art. This time, Tsunade was even more surprised. Lei Luo-kun, didn't you already learn the Sage Art of Shikatsu Forest? Why go to learn the Sage Art of Mount Myoboku? Lei Luo replied in a deep voice, because I want to become stronger. I want to integrate the Sage Art of the 3 holy places into one. Looking at Lei Luo's determined expression, Tsunade knew that he had made up his mind, but wanting to learn the Sage Art of the 3 holy lands and integrate them is much harder and more dangerous than learning the Shikatsu Forest Sage Art. So Tsunade still wanted to persuade Lei Luo. Lei Luo-kun, with your current strength, it can be said that the ninja world is almost without your opponent. There is no need to take such a big risk to learn the 3 sacred places Sage Art. Lei Luo shook his head and said, Master Tsunade, I have made up my mind, you don't need to persuade me anymore. And the ninja world is not as safe as it is now, and there are many people who want to make trouble secretly hidden. And learning Sage Art is not as dangerous as you think. My physique is quite special. The difficulty of practicing Sage Art is much easier for me than ordinary people. After hearing what Lei Luo said, Tsunade stopped persuading and said, Jiraiya should be in the land of soup recently. Lei Luo was speechless when he heard what Tsunade said. It turned out to be Tang Jiguo. You don't have to think about it to know what Jiraiya is doing in Unokuni. There are many Izumi in Unokuni, and for Jiraiya, it is a holy place for materials. Although the main purpose of Jiraiya going out of the village is to follow the traces of Orochimaru, it is not impossible to take materials along the way. Okay, I see, thank you Tsunade-sama. After speaking, Lei Luo turned around and left. It was time to go back to prepare and set off for the land of soup. Lei Luo has been in Tang Jiguo for 10 days, and has also wandered around several cities in Tang Jiguo. Every time he entered a city, Lei Luo would focus on the Wen Izumi, the baths, and the Yuhi Lantern area, but he found no trace of Jiraiya. The capital of the land of soup is not far ahead. I hope I can find Jiraiya this time. Lei Luo thought to himself as he looked at the outline of the city in the distance. This is the second time that Lei Luo has come to the kingdom of Tang. The last time he came was to destroy the evil gods. Recalling that, the scene of Wang Chuan, the leader of the evil god sect, crying at Lei Luo's feet is still vivid in his mind, as if it had just happened yesterday. It seems that I'm really getting older. I heard that when I get older, people like to make memories. After all, in my 2 lifetimes, I am 50 or 60 years old. Lei Luo couldn't help sighing in his heart. Walking on the streets of the capital city of Tang Kingdom, looking at the neon flashing signboards in the night, Lei Luo was a little dazed, feeling like his soul had suddenly left his body, looking at everything around him in a state of no sadness and no joy. In the tavern, the guests were chatting and chatting. In the casino, people roared, cheering and sighing. Even at the entrance of the originally quiet Wen Izumi store, the owner was loudly soliciting customers. The fun is theirs, and I have nothing. Such a sentence suddenly appeared in Lei Luo's mind, and he felt that it was very suitable for him. Then Lei Luo shook his head, feeling that the whole person had recovered, but he felt a little tired and had no idea of going on. So he found Wen Izumi's shop with few people, opened a private soup, and buried his whole body in Wen Izumi. The warm Izumi water stimulated Lei Luo's body, which made him feel a sense of reality and gradually recovered. At this moment, a woman screaming and shouting suddenly came from outside Wen Izumi, which made Lei Luo feel refreshed instantly. Ah, someone is peeping. Pervert. Ding 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 dong. Kept coming, it should be all kinds of messes that the women recognized. This movement reminded Lei Luo of the goal of this trip. It can't be such a coincidence. Is it possible to meet Jiraiya here? Lei Luo directly turned on his 5-vision omnipotence and observed what was happening outside, only to see a man keep dodging the objects thrown behind him and running out. It really is him. A smile appeared on the corner of Lei Luo's mouth. Although the man did not have white hair and his appearance was completely different from Jiraiya, Lei Luo was able to confirm that it was Jiraiya. That chakra fluctuation must be him. It seems that Jiraiya is not stupid, and knows how to use transformation technique. Lei Luo stared at Jiraiya, who was constantly walking away with his 5-vision omnipotence, and hurriedly walked out of Wen Izumi, putting on his clothes in an instant and hanging far behind Jiraiya. Lei Luo intends to first determine where Jiraiya is staying, and then go to the door. If you catch up directly now, if someone notices, it will be bad if you think it is the accomplice of. Oh, damn, I've been so hidden, yet I'm still being discovered. Jiraiya muttered as she walked towards the hotel where she was staying. But the lady I saw just now has really long legs. It's not a loss, it's really a good material. Jiraiya recalled the scene she saw just now, with a lewd smile on her face. Jiraiya felt that her inspiration kept coming, and when she returned to the room, she was ready to pick up a pen and quickly write a paragraph. At this moment, a figure suddenly flashed in from the window. Who? Jiraiya instantly became alert. Although he was lustful, he was still a powerful ninja with the basic qualities of a ninja. Sir Jiraiya, I didn't expect that after so many years of absence, your hobby has not changed. You still like to peep. The figure who broke in was Lei Luo, looking at Jiraiya and couldn't help laughing. Jiraiya also saw Lei Luo's appearance clearly at this time, and was relieved. It turned out to be your kid, who I thought was. And I'm taking materials, looking for materials for writers to write. Can it be called voyeurism? Your sudden intrusion has disrupted my inspiration all at once. Then it was about how important the inspiration was and how difficult it was to get the material, and the whole room was suddenly filled with a happy atmosphere. All right, Lord Jiraiya, don't say it anymore, it's my fault, all right. Lei Luo stopped Jiraiya, who wanted to continue his long speech. He really didn't expect Jiraiya to have the potential to be talkative. Jiraiya muttered a lot, and not only was a little thirsty. Then he directly picked up the jug on the table, and poured it down in one breath. Immediately afterwards, Jiraiya looked at Lei Luo and said, "Tell me, what do you have to do with me? You can't come all the way from Konoha just to catch up with me." Author's digression, 793,420,536, Book Friends Group, wait for you guys. Chapter 144 Mount Myoboku, the Great Toad Immortal. Lei Luo looked at Jiraiya and replied, "Master Jiraiya, you are right, I do have something to look for you. Welcome everyone to join the group 542,225,482. Jiraiya smiled slightly and said, "I knew there must be something wrong with you, kid. Tell me, what's the matter?" Lei Luo smiled and replied, "Master Jiraiya, I want to learn Mount Myoboku's sage art, but I don't know if I can." Jiraiya pondered for a while after hearing the words, and then said, "I don't have any objection if you want to learn Mount Myoboku's sage art, but I have to ask the Great Toad Immortal if he agrees." And, you know, learning sage art is very dangerous, even I can't fully control it right now. Lei Luo replied with a smile, "Don't worry, Mr. Jiraiya, I know all about it. I have already mastered sage art in Shikatsu Forest, and I know the condition of sage art when he was practicing." Jiraiya pouted and said, "Don't frame me, kid, if you really learned the sage art of Shikatsu Forest, then why did you learn Mount Myoboku sage art?" But the next moment, Jiraiya was shocked. Because he saw that Lei Luo in front of him did not have a hand seal and did not have any preparations, so he directly entered the sage mode. Seeing that there was no other change except the golden eyeshadow around his eyes, he felt a little sad. "I didn't expect that I've been studying sage art for so many years, and I'm not as good as a junior master," Jiraiya thought. "How about it, Lord Jiraiya, I didn't frame you." Lei Luo looked at Jiraiya's shocked expression and couldn't help but feel a little smug. After listening to Lei Luo's question, Jiraiya came back to her senses and said, "Since your kid has already mastered Shikatsu Forest sage art, why are you still learning Mount Myoboku sage art?" Lei Luo replied, "Of course it's to become stronger. After I finish learning Mount Myoboku sage art, I have to find a way to find Raichi Cave." Jiraiya asked in surprise, "Are you trying to fuse the sage art of the three holy places?" "As far as I know, no one has ever thought of that." Lei Luo chuckled and said, "Isn't there one now?" "Okay, Jiraiya-sama, then please help me to ask the great Toad Immortal to see if I agree to study Mount Myoboku sage art." Jiraiya sighed and said, "Okay, I'll ask you a question for your kid." Then Jiraiya said, "You kid go to open a room to live by yourself, what is it like to stay in my room at night? I don't like men, I will go back to Mount Myoboku tomorrow and ask for you." Lei Luo replied, "Lord Jiraiya, then I'll trouble you." Then he walked away from the window in an instant. The next morning, Jiraiya woke up early, and he didn't forget what he promised Lei Luo last night. The art of psychic. Bang! A small old toad appeared in front of Jiraiya. "Oh, little Jiraiya, what are you doing with the summons early in the morning? Shima is preparing breakfast for me." The old toad looked at Jiraiya and said. Jiraiya replied respectfully, "Fukusaku Immortal, I asked you to come out because I have something to go to Mount Myoboku, and I have to meet Big Toad Immortal." Immortal Shenzuo replied, "Okay, but Immortal Da may not be awake. Then I'll go back first and use reverse psychics to pull you to Mount Myoboku later." Jiraiya looked at Immortal Fukusaku as if he would channel him once he returned, and hurriedly said, "It's okay, Immortal Fukusaku, don't be too hasty, just call me over after you have breakfast." Immortal Fukusaku nodded, bang, turned into smoke and disappeared in front of his eyes, returning to Mount Myoboku. Jiraiya breathed a sigh of relief, a drop of cold sweat dripping from her head. "Fortunately, I reacted quickly, otherwise I was channeled to Mount Myoboku, and Immortal Zima would definitely ask me to eat a meal of insects together." Jiraiya thinks of the days when she was studying sage art, and she is a little scared when she thinks about it. Every day is full of various bugs, which is delicious for toads, but torture for Jiraiya. Speaking of which, after Immortal Fukusaku returned to Mount Myoboku, Immortal Shima asked, "Old man, who channeled you just now?" Immortal Fukusaku replied, "It's little Jiraiya, he has something to ask Immortal Big Toad, and I'll reverse him after we have breakfast later." Immortal Zima nodded and replied, "Well, little Jiraiya didn't say it earlier, otherwise, I would have prepared his breakfast as well." "Then let's start." Immortal Fukusaku nodded, then picked up a worm and stuffed it into his mouth, and said, "Old lady, your cooking skills are still so good, this worm is very fresh and delicious." Immortal Zima smiled and replied, "Okay old man, eat quickly, don't make little Jiraiya wait too long." Immortal Fukusaku finished his breakfast and licked the corner of his mouth, then used the reverse psychic technique. Boom! Appeared on Mount Myoboku with a puff of smoke. Immortal Fukusaku looked at Jiraiya and said, "Let's go, little Jiraiya, I'll take you to see Immortal Big Toad, just for a walk after dinner." Then Jiraiya followed Immortal Fukasaku towards the temple in the heart of Myogi Yamanaka, where Immortal Big Toad lived. The Great Toad Immortal. The Great Toad Immortal. Immortal Shensaku jumped to the side of the Great Toad Immortal and shouted beside his ears. The Big Toad Immortal slowly opened his eyes, but he obviously hadn't woken up yet, and his consciousness was a little blurry. Immortal Fukasaku opened his eyes when he saw Immortal Big Toad, and said, "Immortal Toad, Jiraiya is looking for you for something." Oh tilde, the Big Toad Fairy looked at Jiraiya who was standing below and asked, "The one below, who are you?" Jiraiya replied with a black line on her head, "Immortal Big Toad, I'm Jiraiya." Oh, it turned out to be little Jiraiya. The Big Toad Immortal looked at Jiraiya and replied, "I'm sorry, I'm old, I can't remember clearly, what's the matter with you?" Jiraiya replied, "Sage Toad, I have a junior who wants to learn Mount Myoboku's sage art, so I came to ask for your opinion." The Big Toad Immortal replied, "Junior. Is it the little Minato?" Jiraiya replied in a low voice, "Immortal Big Toad, Minato is no longer there, he is another junior of mine, his name is Leiluo." Huh, the Great Toad Immortal seemed to notice something, but Jiraiya, who looked down, didn't say anything. After a pause, Immortal Big Toad continued, "Leiluo. To learn sage art, you just need to find Fukasaku and them." Jiraiya shook his head slightly and said, "It's not just about learning sage art, because he has already mastered sage art in Shikatsu Forest, so I need to ask you." Immortal Big Toad nodded and replied, "Okay, then you bring him, I'll see him before making a decision." "Thank you Big Toad Immortal." When Jiraiya spoke, the Big Toad Immortal had already closed his eyes and fell into a deep sleep again. Immortal Fukasaku jumped on Jiraiya's shoulder and said, "Little Jiraiya, then bring your junior over here." Chapter 145 Head to Mount Myoboku. Start practicing. Leiluo also got up early in the morning, and saw Jiraiya disappearing into the room through 5 vision omnipotence. It must have been reverse channeled to Mount Myoboku. When Leiluo saw Zilai's figure reappearing in the room, he immediately rushed over. Leiluo turned in through the window, still familiarly. Then he looked at Jiraiya and asked, "Lord Jiraiya, how is it? Did Immortal Big Toad agree?" Leiluo who appeared, Jiraiya said, "I'm still preparing to find you, the Big Toad Fairy wants to see you." Leiluo nodded and said, "Okay, then how do we get to Mount Myoboku? Is it signing a contract and then using reverse channeling to pass through?" Jiraiya touched his head, smiled awkwardly and said, "I'm sorry, I didn't ask, wait a minute." The Art of Psychic. Immortal Fukasaku was summoned by Jiraiya again. "What happened to little Jiraiya?" Immortal Fukasaku asked. Jiraiya pointed to Leiluo and replied, "Fukasaku Immortal, this is my junior who wants to learn Mount Myoboku sage art. I would like to ask if he can sign a contract with Mount Myoboku." Immortal Fukasaku looked at Leiluo and said, "Okay, let him sign the contract, reverse channel to Mount Myoboku, and then I'll take you to see Immortal Big Toad." Jiraiya nodded, took out Mount Myoboku's psychic scroll and handed it to Leiluo. "Leiluo-kun, sign your name." Leiluo took the scroll of Mount Myoboku and opened it, and there were 5 names on it. Otsutsuki Hagoromo. Jiraiya. Namikaze Minato. There are 2 names with scribbled handwriting, and I have never heard of them in the original book, so I don't know who they are. Leiluo then signed his name under Namikaze Minato's name. Then put away the psychic scroll and return it to Jiraiya. "Okay, then let's go to Mount Myoboku," Jiraiya said after taking the psychic scroll. Boom, boom. 2 clouds of smoke dissipated, and Leiluo and Jiraiya came to Mount Myoboku. Leiluo looked at everything in Mount Myoboku curiously, and felt that the environment was much better than Shikatsu Forest. It could be called the sunshine and the fragrance of birds and flowers, and it was not as dark and humid as Shikatsu Forest. Then Leiluo looked at Immortal Fukasaku and jumped over. "Let's go. It's time to meet the Great Toad Immortal," Immortal Fukasaku said, if I go too late, I am worried that the great toad immortal will fall into a deep sleep, and it will not be easy to wake up. After finishing speaking, Immortal Fukasaku turned around and took the lead towards the Miyamuyamanaka Heart Temple. Lei Luo nodded, and Jiraiya immediately followed. Immortal Big Toad, the person you want to meet is here. Immortal Fukasaku jumped to the ear of Immortal Big Toad and said. Lei Luo is looking at the appearance of the Big Toad Fairy, and it is exactly the same as what he saw in the previous life animation. The Big Toad Immortal is orange all over, with yellow eyes, a string of beads around his neck, and a lavender opal in the middle with the word, oil, written on it. He wears a hat like a doctor's hat on his head, and under his body is a huge seat with the word, Shion, written in front of the seat. Immortal Big Toad opened his eyes under Immortal Fukasaku's call, and saw an imperceptible divine light in Lei Luo's eyes. You are Lei Luo. A peaceful voice rang in Lei Luo's ear. Lei Luo nodded and replied respectfully, I'm Lei Luo when I meet the great toad immortal. Immortal Big Toad suddenly said something inexplicable, but it shocked Lei Luo. The light from another world will surely illuminate this dark world. You can learn Mount Myoboku's sage art, I agree. Then he ignored the two people in front of him, closed his eyes and fell into a deep sleep. The words of this Big Toad Fairy mean that he sees that I am not from this world. Lei Luo was shocked. Jiraiya patted Lei Luo, woke him up from the shock, and said, Lei Luo-kun, you don't need to think too much about what Immortal Big Toad just said. He always says something inexplicable. Now let's go out first. Well, go to the place where you practice Mount Myoboku sage art. Quote. Lei Luo listened to Jiraiya's words, and couldn't help but curled his lips in his heart. You don't need to care what you say, but you value the prophecy of Immortal Big Toad more than anyone else. But Lei Luo naturally wouldn't say it stupidly, but said, well, let's go. Lei Luo followed Immortal Shenzuo to a waterfall. The waterfall left behind not water, but oil. Mount Myoboku can be used to help sense natural energy. Around the pool under the waterfall are stone toads of various shapes. Little Lei Luo, since you want to learn the sage art of our Mount Myoboku, you must know the dangers of practicing sage art. See these stone toads. Immortal Fukasaku pointed to the surrounding stone toads and asked Lei Luo. Lei Luo nodded and replied, Fukasaku Immortal, I know that these toads were petrified after failing to practice sage art. I had already understood the dangers of sage art practice before I came here. I have successfully mastered the sage art in Shikatsu Forest now, and it should be easier for me to practice sage art than others. Immortal Shenzuo looked at Lei Luo and sighed and said, okay, since you already know it all, I won't talk nonsense anymore. Now you can take off your clothes. Undress. Lei Luo looked a little embarrassed at Jiraiya who was still standing beside him. Although he said they were all men, he wasn't someone who liked being naked in broad daylight. Immortal Fukasaku nodded and said, yes, you need toad oil to practice Mount Myoboku sage art. You can easily apply toad oil on your body when you take off your clothes. Okay. When Lei Luo heard the words, he didn't hesitate anymore. It was both men and toads. What were they afraid of? He took off his clothes neatly. Of course, I still left a pair of underwear, which has no effect on practicing sage art. Then Immortal Fukasaku told Lei Luo about the matters needing attention in the practice of Mount Myoboku sage art, the method of Mount Myoboku sage art practice, the chakra running route and so on. After making sure that Lei Luo remembered everything clearly, Immortal Fukasaku asked Lei Luo to sit down cross-legged. I will apply a small amount of toad oil on your back now. You try it first. If the situation is not good, I will wake you up. Immortal Fukasaku picked up a special stone stick in his right hand, and in his left hold a pot of toad oil. Lei Luo nodded to indicate that he was ready. Immortal Fukasaku applied toad oil on Lei Luo's sadness, but did not dare to take too much. He then carefully stared at Lei Luo who was trying to practice cultivation, and as soon as there was an abnormal situation, he would wake up immediately. Author's digression, brothers. Silver ticket contest go. Our Hokage fangirls are no weaker than any other category. Duck. Chapter 146 Mount Myoboku Sage Art Success. Leave. Immortal Fukasaku stared for a while, and found that Lei Luo had absorbed all the toad oil on his back, but his body did not show any abnormality until Lei Luo opened his eyes. How do you feel? Immortal Fukasaku asked, looking at Lei Luo, who opened his eyes. Lei Luo smiled and replied, "It feels good, I have successfully felt the natural energy just now." And Lei Luo himself felt that the natural energy absorbed by Mount Myoboku toad oil was different from the natural energy absorbed in Shikatsu Forest before. Sensationally, Mount Myoboku's natural energy is a little more cranky. Listening to Lei Luo's words, Jiraiya was relieved and said, "Lei Luo-kun, since you succeeded in absorbing it the first time, then I am relieved. Then you can practice sage art at Mount Myoboku. I'll go first, and I have to find Orochimaru's trail." Lei Luo nodded and replied, "Lord Jiraiya, thank you very much for this time." Jiraiya waved his hand, smiled slightly, then released the reverse channel and returned to the land of soup. After watching Jiraiya leave, Lei Luo turned to Immortal Shenzuo and said, "Immortal Shenzuo, please, let's continue to practice." Immortal Fukasaku nodded and smeared toad oil on Lei Luo again, this time directly covering the entire upper body. Lei Luo crossed his knees and quickly entered a state of cultivation. With the Shikatsu Forest sage art practice experience, Lei Luo's progress is still very fast, but how to integrate the two sage art really stumped Lei Luo. Half a year has passed, and Lei Luo still has not found the direction of fusion, but he can already use the sage art of Mount Myoboku alone. And using Mount Myoboku sage art to enter sage mode also looks different from Shikatsu Forest sage art. This time, Lei Luo is no longer a golden eyeshadow, but an orange yuhi color. Orange yuhi, how is it similar to Naruto's sage mode? Lei Luo couldn't figure it out. The fusion of the two sage modes has been tried countless times. Either using Shikatsu Forest sage mode first, then incorporating Mount Myoboku sage mode, or reversing the order, will not work. Epsilon equals Omicron, alas. Lei Luo sighed and dispersed the sage mode. How is little Lei Luo this time? Immortal Shenzuo asked, looking at Lei Luo. Lei Luo shook his head and said, "There is still no progress. Fukasaku Immortal, I feel that there should be no solution in a short time, and I am ready to leave. After all, my goal of coming to Mount Myoboku this time has been completed, and the sage art of Mount Myoboku has been successfully practiced, so it's time for me to leave." Immortal Fukasaku nodded and said, "Okay, little Lei Luo, do you want to talk to little Jiraiya when you leave?" Lei Luo thought for a while and said, "I should talk to Lord Jiraiya. I just have something to ask him. Please reverse channel him." Immortal Fukasaku nodded and used the reverse psychic technique directly. Boom. Jiraiya's figure appeared on the spot, holding a telescope in his hand, with a wretched look. "Lord Jiraiya, it seems that you can't change this habit," Lei Luo said with a teasing. That she was reverse channeled to Mount Myoboku, she immediately stood up, put the telescope away, and pretended that nothing happened. Then he looked at Lei Luo and said, "Yo, Lei Luo, long time no see, how is the progress of sage art practice?" Lei Luo smiled and replied, "I have successfully cultivated Mount Myoboku sage art. I called you here to talk about this." "What?" Jiraiya was shocked when she heard Lei Luo's words, "You have succeeded in your practice after only half a year." Then Jiraiya thought that she had been practicing hard for 3 years before she could initially enter sage mode. Every time she entered, she had to prepare a lot, and she had to rely on the help of Immortal Shensaku and Immortal Zima. Lei Luo didn't say much, and when he moved the chakra, he immediately entered Mount Myoboku sage mode, and the orange yuhi eyeshadow appeared around the eye socket. Jiraiya was even more shocked when he saw this scene. Not only did Lei Luo practice faster, but even his sage mode was more perfect than himself. Immortal Fukasaku looked at Jiraiya and said, "Little Jiraiya, if you worked hard to practice Mount Myoboku, your sage mode would have been perfect. Don't think about it now, I have to ask my wife and I to help you every time. Jiraiya laughed a few times, trying to cover up her embarrassment, and said, ha ha ha, mainly because of my current strength, basically no one can let me use sage mode, don't worry so much, take it slow. Just come. Immortal Fukasaku shook his head after hearing Jiraiya's words, and then said, Little Lei Luo, don't you have something to ask little Jiraiya? You can leave Mount Myoboku after asking, and I'll go back first, old man. Lei Luo nodded and said, Immortal Shenzuo, thank you. Don't be so polite. Immortal Fukasaku jumped away after speaking. Jiraiya watched the leaving Immortal Fukasaku disappear from sight, then turned to Lei Luo and asked, Lei Luo-kun, what else are you looking for from me? Lei Luo said in a deep voice, Lord Jiraiya, didn't you leave Konoha to track down Orochimaru? I want to ask if you have any news from him now. Jiraiya frowned and said, Lei Luo-kun, what are you asking Orochimaru for? Lei Luo chuckled and said, Don't worry, Lord Jiraiya, I asked Orochimaru's location because he has the psychic scroll of Raichi Cave in his hand. You know, my purpose is to learn the sage art of the 3 holy places and then integrate it, but I don't know the location of Raichi Cave. If you want to go to Raichi Cave, you can only go through the psychic contract in the hands of Orochimaru. I'm not trying to shoot him, so don't worry. Hearing what Lei Luo said, Jiraiya replied, I have nothing to worry about Orochimaru, he is just the missing nin of the village, I worry about you. Looking at Jiraiya's flickering eyes, Lei Luo couldn't help but complained in his heart. I don't know you yet. Your feelings for Orochimaru are similar to those of Naruto's 2 Jinchuriki column sons in the original novel. What are you pretending to do? Then Lei Luo said, Master Jiraiya, do you have any news from your side? Jiraiya looked at Lei Luo's staring eyes at him, sighed and said, I found some traces of Orochimaru not long ago, and he seems to have appeared in Tianjiguo. Hearing Jiraiya's answer, Lei Luo's mouth showed a slight smile, he already knew where Orochimaru was most likely to hide now. Chapter 147 Go to the Land of Fields. Find a ninja at your door. Lei Luo then asked Jiraiya, Lord Jiraiya, is Tianji the country that has a ninja village called Yinyan Village? Jiraiya nodded and replied, yes, Tianjiguo has built a new ninja village in China in recent years. The name is Yinyan Village. The ninjas in that village attack with sound, which is considered to be somewhat powerful. Hearing this answer from Jiraiya, Lei Luo is now certain in his heart that Orochimaru has a 90% chance of being here. Then Lei Luo said, okay, I see, thank you, Lord Jiraiya. Jiraiya waved her hand and said, then I'll leave if you have nothing to do now. Lei Luo nodded, and Jiraiya turned into smoke and disappeared with a bang. Then Lei Luo also released the reverse psychic technique and returned to the land of soup. Maybe it was Lei Luo's good luck, the room he returned to by reverse channeling was still empty. Lei Luo turned on the 5-sided omnipotence to observe the surroundings and found that there was no problem, then immediately left through the window. Tanokuni is a small country bordered by fire and Yukuni, and there was no ninja village before. After Akatsuki, who broke away from Orochimaru, bribed Tanokuni daimyo to establish Otogakure village in its country. But the village of Otogakure was not employed in the land of the land, and after Orochimaru bribed the name of the land, it occupied the land of the land, and the land of the land became the main base of Orochimaru. Just like its name, the whole country is made up of fields. It is midsummer now, and the whole field is covered with green plants. With the breeze, there are ripples. Lei Luo traveled for a few days, and finally arrived from the country of Tang to the country of Tien. Tianjiguo is so beautiful. Looking at the scene in front of him, Lei Luo couldn't help but exclaim, I didn't expect Orochimaru to be quite good at choosing places. Lei Luo set off again and came to a small town on the border of Tianji before nightfall. But what surprised Lei Luo was that he met a familiar figure in the city. Lord Jiraiya, how come you are here? Lei Luo looked at Jiraiya with black lines all over his head. Now Lei Luo and the two are in the box of a tavern. Lei Luo asked when they were full. Jiraiya picked up the wine glass, drank it, tun, laughed and replied, ha ha ha, I'm not worried about your safety, that's why I'm waiting for you here. If you want to come from the country of soup to the country of Tien, this small town is your only way. Lei Luo felt helpless after hearing Jiraiya's words, and asked, Lord Jiraiya, are you not afraid that I didn't stop in this small town, but went straight through? Jiraiya's laughter stopped abruptly, as if he hadn't thought of this situation himself. Then he smiled awkwardly again, haha, isn't it time to wait, don't care about those details. Lei Luo sighed and asked, Master Jiraiya, do you really want to go find Orochimaru with me? Jiraiya took another sip of wine and replied, of course, I left Konoha to find Orochimaru. Lei Luo said, well, since that's the case, let's go find Orochimaru together. However, there is one thing I have to say in advance. Lei Luo stared straight at Jiraiya with a very serious expression. Jiraiya looked at Lei Luo and said, if you have anything, just say it. Lei Luo opened his mouth and replied, if Orochimaru shoots me, I won't be merciful. I hope you won't stop me then. Jiraiya paused, then nodded. At this moment, the door of the box was suddenly opened, and a female ninja stood outside the door, looking about 30 years old. She looked at Jiraiya and said, damn it, I finally found you. Lei Luo looked at the forehead protector on Nun's head, but didn't remember where she came from for a while. When Jiraiya looked back and saw the female ninja, he instantly woke up, but his first reaction was to prepare to run away. But Jiraiya was stopped by Lei Luo as soon as she got up. Hey, Lei Luo, let me go, Jiraiya said anxiously. Lei Luo asked with interest, Master Jiraiya, don't you want to introduce who this female ninja is? Because Lei Luo had sensed that the ninja had no killing intent towards Jiraiya, in addition to anger, there was a trace of shame on her body. This suddenly aroused Lei Luo's curiosity. Then Lei Luo said to the female ninja at the door, this female ninja, please come in and tell me if you have anything, so that others will see a joke. The ninja heard Lei Luo's words, walked in, closed the box door, and sat down. And Jiraiya just smiled awkwardly and didn't say anything. Lei Luo asked the female ninja, this female ninja, do you have anything to do with Jiraiya-sama? The female ninja replied, I'm sorry about what happened just now. My name is Nadako Yuzan, and I come from Nadako village. When Lei Luo heard Nadako Yushien's self-introduction, he suddenly remembered something related. Nadako village is a very special village in the Hokage world. The whole village is full of women, just like the daughter country in Journey to the West. However, for the sustainable development of the village also needs men. For example, the candidates of the village can challenge the outside world, defeat the outside world very powerfully, and bring them back to the village to be their husbands. First, they can gain fame, and second, they can reproduce offspring. Lei Luo remembers that there is such a scene in the original book. When Jiraiya was young, she secretly sneaked into Nadako village and was discovered by a beautiful woman in Nadako village. Subsequently, the two started a battle with marriage as a bet. As a result, the two were almost inseparable, so they made an agreement that the battle would be completed by their own disciples. So at the end of the original book, Naruto and Nadeshiko Shizuka, a disciple of Nadako Yuzan, fought. Jiraiya, this guy is not authentic, so he slapped Naruto. Could this Nadako Yuzan be the ninja who fought with Jiraiya at the beginning? This time is not right. Lei Luo was a little puzzled. Just then, Jiraiya spoke up. Lei Luo-kun, this Nadako Yushien can be regarded as an old friend of mine. When I was in Fuzzy Village some time ago, I accidentally ran into her, and she ran after her from the village. After listening to Jiraiya's words, Lei Luo couldn't help but twitch at the corners of his eyes and complained in his heart. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to go to Fuzzy Village but I still don't hide. Chapter 148_Reason. Showdown. Tukao returned to Tukao. This matter still has to be resolved. It is impossible for this Nadeko Yuzan to go to Orochimaru with him. So Lei Luo asked Nadeko Yuxian, I don't know why you are looking for Lord Jiraiya. Nadeshiko Yuzan replied, I want to fight him again. As expected, Lei Luo thought, it seems that this Nadeko Yuzan is the woman who agreed with Jiraiya at the beginning. Then Lei Luo asked Jiraiya, Lord Jiraiya, what do you think? Jiraiya sighed, after being chased for so long, there is no way to escape. So Jiraiya said to Nadeko Yuzan, I agree to fight you again, but it's too late for 10:10 today, let's wait for tomorrow. After listening to Jiraiya's words, Nadeko Yuzan was very happy and nodded. That night, the three found a hotel and opened 3 rooms. After seeing Nadeshiko entering the room, Lei Luo slipped into Jiraiya's room and intercepted Jiraiya who was about to escape. Lei Luo asked, Lord Jiraiya, what are you doing? Bullshit, of course I'm ready to run. Jiraiya said, shaking the hand that was grabbed by Lei Luo. Lord Jiraiya, you have promised others, so it's not good to run like this. Lei Luo said to Jiraiya. Wouldn't it be more embarrassing if you ran away and people chased after Konoha? Jiraiya said angrily, then what can I do? Isn't it all your fault? Lei Luo was very puzzled when he heard this. Lord Jiraiya, what does your business have to do with me? It's not that I asked you to go to Fuzzy Village to collect customs. Alas. Jiraiya sighed, put down the idea of running away, turned and walked to the table to sit down, and told Lei Luo what happened. Through Jiraiya's narration, Lei Luo figured out the whole ins and outs, and also knew what Jiraiya asked and said that there were also his own problems. The story of Jiraiya is similar to what Lei Luo knew before, that is, when he was young, he went to Nadeko village to collect wind, but it was discovered that Nadeko Yuxian chased him out and challenged him to bet on marriage, but after his release in the middle, the two fought to a draw. Then the two agreed that the disciples of both sides would compete again in the future, and Jiraiya had not been to Nadeko village for many years. And after Lei Luo went to Mount Myoboku to practice, Jiraiya passed by Nadeko village while wandering, and couldn't help but ran in to look for some materials. Originally, with the strength of Jiraiya, it is difficult to be discovered now, but I did not expect that Jiraiya was suddenly reverse-channeled to Mount Myoboku. Hearing about the success of Lei Luo's Mount Myoboku sage art practice, and his worries about Lei Luo going to find Orochimaru, he forgot that he was still peeping before he came to Mount Myoboku. As a result, after the reverse psychic was released, he was discovered when he returned to Nadeko village, and what happened now? Hearing what Jiraiya said, Lei Luo was a little bit dumbfounded, but Lei Luo felt that this matter was actually quite easy to resolve, it just depends on how Jiraiya decides. So Lei Luo said to Jiraiya, Lord Jiraiya, I think you should just follow. You won't suffer from marrying someone. Besides, you're not too young, so you can't think of a way to inherit your family's lineage. Do you want your family to fail? In a few more years, it is estimated that you will become powerless. Jiraiya glared at Lei Luo and said, what is powerless? This immortal is strong. Then he shook his head sharply, no. This immortal made you crooked. Now it's not a question of strength, but it's impossible for me to marry her. Looking at Jiraiya with a resolute attitude, Lei Luo felt a little helpless. At this moment, the door of the room was pushed open again, and it was Nadeshiko Yuzan who stood outside the door. Yuhi Nadeshiko looked at him and said coldly, Don't worry, Jiraiya, I'm not fighting you this time for marriage. You are the legendary Sannin. How could I be your opponent? I just want to see how far my strength is from yours after so many years. Even Lei Luo could hear that Nadeshiko Yuzan's words were unsatisfactory, but Jiraiya, like a fool, took Nadeshiko's words seriously. Jiraiya laughed twice and said, Hey, if I had known you were just here for a fight, I wouldn't have run away. If you want to fight, we can fight now. After listening to Jiraiya, words, Lei Luo couldn't help but sigh in his heart. This guy has written so much, how can he be so clueless? People have been waiting for you for more than 10 years, and they have always kept the promise in their hearts. You really think they are just here to fight you, my god? Okay. After hearing Jiraiya's words, Nadeko Yuzin was probably cold-hearted, and said, then let's find a convenient place to fight now. Then Nadeshiko Yuzin left immediately, and Jiraiya followed immediately. Lei Luo sighed and said, oh, that's fine. After all, Jiraiya can't do anything if she doesn't agree. And there shouldn't be such a mess of drugs like, I love a piece of chai, in the Hokage world. If there is, I'm not sure I can help Jiraiya, but that's all for now. Then Lei Luo followed the direction the two left. By the time Lei Luo found the two outside the city, the two were already fighting. Nadeko Ryu, rumbling gale fist. Nadeko Yuzin's right hand was like a palm like a knife, and there was still a cold air around it, and it attacked Jiraiya's chest fiercely, with a hint of venting. Jiraiya's strength is indeed much higher than Nadeko Yuzin, and she can play with Nadeko Imperial May just by physique. Konoha Fluid Art. Gang Force Whirlwind. Jiraiya dodged Nadeko's attack and kicked her with a kick. Nadeko Yuzin dodged Jiraiya's kick in an instant, retreated violently, and took out a few kunai from the ninja bag. Nadeko Ryu. Vacuum Dance. Nadeshiko Yuzin's figure suddenly spun, and then the kunai in his hand came out of his hand, hitting Jiraiya with a strong wind. Ninja. Needle Jizo. Jiraiya's figure does not dodge or evade. With a hand seal in her hand, her white hair grows wildly in an instant, wrapping herself like a hedgehog. When the sound of gold and iron clashing came from Kunwu, and then they all fell to the ground. The hair then fell back to its original shape, leaving Jiraiya unscathed. Nadeshiko Yuzin saw that these attacks had no effect, and once again Hand Seal began to release ninjutsu. Futon, wind style. Strong fan. Quote. Nadeko Yuzin spit out a bunch of strong wind directly from his mouth, and quickly shook the strong wind, like a fan. Jiraiya charged directly towards Nadeko Yuzin, and a group of rapidly spinning chakra appeared in his right hand, pressing on Nadeshiko Yuzin's ninjutsu with a strong wind. Rasengan. Chapter 149 Nadeshiko Yuzin is gone. Finally at Otogakur village. I saw that Rasengan in Jiraiya's hands still had enough strength after defeating Nadeshiko Gozen's ninjutsu, and attacked Nadeko Gozen again. Boom. Rasengan in Jiraiya's hand pressed in front of Nadeshiko Yuzin, making a big pit, and the stones splashed. At this time, Nadeshiko Yuzin had already closed his eyes and did not resist the move just now. Nadeshiko Yuzin, who felt that she didn't have her hands, opened her eyes, looked at Jiraiya in front of her and said, I lost. Then the corner of his mouth forced a smile, but the smile was full of bitterness. Nadeshiko Yuzin then said, as expected of the legendary Sannin, his strength is much stronger than me. Ha ha ha, where is it? Jiraiya rubbed the back of his head and said with a big laugh. Nadeko Yuzin then said, since the fight is over, I'll leave, don't forget our promise. Jiraiya nodded and replied, don't worry, I won't forget it. Then Nadeshiko Yuzin turned around and left, disappearing into the night. Ha ha ha, how is it, Lei Luo? My strength is very strong. Jiraiya walked over to Lei Luo with a smile on her face. Lei Luo looked at Nadeshiko Yuzin's direction and sighed, then replied to Jiraiya, yes, yes, you are very strong, Jiraiya-sama. Let's go, it's time for us to go back to rest, and we'll have to rush to find Orochimaru tomorrow. Then Lei Luo turned around and walked towards the city. The two rested for the night and set off directly for Otogakur village the next morning. 2 days later, Lei Luo and Jiraiya finally came to Otogakur village. Ah, it's finally here, I hope Orochimaru will be here, it's hard to miss it. Lei Luo thought while looking at the gate of Otogakur village in front of him. Then Lei Luo and Jiraiya walked into the village of Otogakur, and did not transform into hiding their identities. Otogakur Village, Orochimaru Underground Base. At this time, Orochimaru was doing an experiment, and an Otogakur walked in and waited patiently, daring not to disturb him. It wasn't until Orochimaru put down the things in his hand that Otogakur stepped forward and said respectfully, "Lord Orochimaru." Orochimaru glanced at Otogakur in front of him, but without looking up, he said, "Is something wrong?" Otogakur replied respectfully, "Lord Orochimaru, 2 ninjas came to the village today, the ones you mentioned earlier to pay special attention to." "Oh." Orochimaru then raised his head, "Who is it?" Otogakur replied, "It's Jiraiya and Lei Luo from Konoha." "Is it that guy Jiraiya again? It's really haunted." Orochimaru licked the corner of his mouth with a gloomy expression. "I didn't expect Lei Luo to come this time, I don't know what their purpose is." Then Orochimaru said to Otogakur, "Okay, I see, you go down first." Otogakur nodded respectfully and stepped back, while Orochimaru looked gloomy and didn't know what to think. "Lei Luo-kun, how can we find Orochimaru Jiraiya asked Lei Luo. Now the two have settled in an inn in the village of Otogakur. Facing Jiraiya's question, Lei Luo seemed very calm, because he knew that when they entered Otogakur village, Orochimaru must have known. After all, the village of Otogakur is Orochimaru's lair, so it wouldn't make sense if there were no arrangements. Lei Luo opened his mouth and said to Jiraiya, "Don't worry, Lord Jiraiya, I have a special ability of perception. As long as Orochimaru appears, I will definitely be able to find him." Lei Luo entered Yinyan village. He had already turned on his 5-vision omnipotence to observe Otogakur village, but he didn't find anything unusual in the place he walked along the way today, and presumably the place where Orochimaru stayed must be full of enchantments outside, which will also have a certain hindering effect on Lei Luo. But Lei Luo is going to take a walk around the building in the center of Otogakur village tomorrow. After all, that's where Orochimaru's laboratory may exist recently. And if Orochimaru was in the village of Otogakur, knowing they were coming, he would definitely take some action. When they don't have to look for them, Orochimaru will automatically come to the door. "Okay." Jiraiya felt a little bored just waiting, and then said, "Then I'll go out for a walk and see if I can find any traces." Lei Luo looked at Jiraiya and knew that he must be restless. He would probably go out to those entertainment venues for a stroll, but it didn't matter. After all, it was Jiraiya himself who wanted to keep up, so he didn't have any scruples when he wasn't there. So Lei Luo nodded and said to Jiraiya, "Okay then, Jiraiya-sama, you can go. If there is anything you can send me a message through the toad of Mount Myoboku." Now that Lei Luo has signed up for Mount Myoboku, it's really convenient to communicate with Jiraiya. Jiraiya nodded, then got up and walked out. Lei Luo looked at the quiet hotel, sat cross-legged on the tatami, and entered the state of Zen meditation. Although Blade Zen is only a method of spiritual cultivation, Lei Luo feels that he can play a greater role now than other skills. Lei Luo, who was immersed in cultivation, suddenly felt that someone was staring at him, and instantly quit the state of Renzen cultivation. But he didn't open his eyes, but pretended to be still practicing. In fact, he had activated all 5 visions, looking for hidden enemies. Soon, Lei Luo found the target staring at him, and there was a snake lurking in the underground of the inn. Sure enough, Orochimaru already knew that we were coming to Otogakur village, and there must be someone watching from Jiraiya. Lei Luo thought quietly, but Orochimaru didn't dare to shoot because he didn't know we were coming. The purpose of the village of Otogakur, and I don't know if we came because of him. If he made a rash move, he would have exposed himself, causing him to fall into passive. However, it can only be said that Orochimaru is too cautious. Danzo is dead now, and he can't deal with me at all with my strength. As long as he doesn't think about dying, I can't deal with him. Since you don't come out, I'll take the initiative to contact you. So Lei Luo opened his eyes directly. After so many years, he still learned some simple ninjutsu from Hokage. After all, some ninjutsu are very useful. Lei Luo simply made a few seals in his hand, and the man disappeared into the room in an instant, fled into the ground, grabbed the snake that was staring at him, and returned to the room again. Lei Luo's hand struggled constantly, hissing and spitting out letters. Lei Luo smiled at the snake in his opponent and said, "Don't worry, I won't kill you, I still have to rely on you to pass the news to me." Then Lei Luo found a pen and paper, and simply wrote 4 words on it, "Cooperation if you have something to do," then rolled it into a roll and put it in sheku, and let go of it. The snake disappeared into the room as soon as it landed. Chapter 150 Orochimaru appears. Otogakur Village, Orochimaru Underground Base. A snake appeared and swam to Orochimaru, and spit out a scroll of paper. Orochimaru didn't dislike it either, he just picked up the paper scroll and opened it, looking at the words, "Something to cooperate," on it. A cold smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Then Orochimaru turned around and walked out of the lab. Lei Luo stayed in the hotel quietly, not entering the state of cultivation again, but waiting for something. At this moment, a figure emerged from the ground and entered Lei Luo's room. "Lei Luo-kun, it's been a long time since I saw you. I didn't expect you to ask me for cooperation." The person who came was Orochimaru. Lei Luo looked at Orochimaru with disgust and said, "Orochimaru, can you stop showing such a disgusting expression? Will you speak normally?" Orochimaru was startled when he heard Lei Luo's words, then said with a smile, "Lei Luo-kun, you really like to joke around. Tell me, what do you want to do with me?" Lei Luo replied, "You have 2 things in your hand that I need." "Oh," Orochimaru said with interest, "I don't know what it is." Lei Luo said with a calm expression, "One is the forbidden technique of impure world reincarnation. I know you are constantly improving it, and I will improve it." Orochimaru unconsciously licked the corner of his mouth and said, "I didn't expect Lei Luo-kun to be interested in forbidden technique, so what else is there?" "Raichi Cave's contract scroll," Lei Luo said in a deep voice. Orochimaru nodded and said, "I do have both of these things. It's okay to give them to you, but what can you give me?" "Lei Luo-kun, since you said you want to cooperate, there must be contacts between the 2 sides. It's impossible for me to be the only one." Lei Luo said lightly, "Well, Orochimaru, you're right, I don't know what you want." "Blood. Your blood." Orochimaru's eyes revealed a strange light. "To tell you the truth, Lei Luo-kun, I have studied your cells, but in addition to finding that the vitality contained in them is relatively large, and nothing was found other than promoting Mokuden, wood-style, cell fusion. Quote. Furthermore, none of the experimental subjects cultivated with your cells can awaken the light and escape the boundaries of blood, and even many people have not changed at all, so I want a little bit of your blood to study." Hearing Orochimaru's words, Lei Luo's expression became cold, and he was even a little scared. He didn't know when Orochimaru obtained his cells and when he performed the experiments. Lei Luo snapped, "Orochimaru, do you want to die?" Orochimaru chuckled twice and said, "Hee, Lei Luo-kun, don't get excited, this isn't what you said about cooperation, it's reasonable for an equivalent exchange." Lei Luo narrowed his eyes and said to Orochimaru in a deep voice, "Orochimaru, now I have changed my attention. If you don't hand over what I want, don't blame me for being rude." Orochimaru licked his lips and said, "Lei Luo-kun, I know you are much stronger now than before, but don't underestimate me. Come on if you want to do it, be careful to be killed by me and become my experimental material." The next moment, a surging murderous aura spewed out of Lei Luo and shrouded Orochimaru, but Orochimaru didn't eat anything, and Lei Luo's murderous aura had no effect on him. Light escape. Laser light. Lei Luo raised his hand and countless lasers shot towards Orochimaru. Orochimaru dodged the incoming lasers. Bah! The laser was too dense. Orochimaru did not hide after all. The first wound appeared on his body, and the wall of the room behind Orochimaru had already been shot with holes. "Lei Luo-kun, then let me test how much progress you have made over the years. Orochimaru no longer dodged. With hand seal in his hand, he counterattacked towards Lei Luo. Snake Ninja. Evil Snake's wrist burst. In an instant, several large snakes appeared in the room and charged towards Lei Luo, and the wall full of holes was directly smashed by the large snake. Just when the big snake rushed in front of Lei Luo, it all exploded, and the stench of blood spurted out with snake venom. But this level of attack was not a threat to Lei Luo at all. Lei Luo opened his mouth and spit out, a sea of golden fire surging out, blood evaporated, and shrouded Orochimaru. The surrounding air is constantly distorted, enough to witness the temperature of this flame. Orochimaru naturally won't sit still, hand seal in his hands again. Sweden, water style. Great waterfall technique. Quote. Sweden, water style. Water dragon bullet. A waterfall appeared in the air and directly washed away the entire hotel, and then a water dragon flew directly into the waterfall and rushed towards the golden flames that came. CCC. The fire and water met, and suddenly a mist filled the air, obscuring the entire line of sight. The outside of the inn was already in chaos, people shouted and fled, and Otogaku also noticed the movement and gathered here. Then Lei Luo suddenly passed from the mist, and slashed directly at Orochimaru with Hiranmaru in hand. Orochimaru's face changed, and with the hand seal in his hand, a stone wall stood up and blocked it. Doden, earth style. Dirt wall. But the stone wall was instantly shattered by Lei Luo, and the stones fell to the ground. And Orochimaru has taken this opportunity to pull the position. Orochimaru, it seems that you haven't made much progress in these years. Lei Luo said to Orochimaru. Orochimaru smiled and said, Lei Luo-kun, your strength did give me a big surprise, but I haven't used my real strength yet. Lei Luo pouted, okay, then let me see it. Saying that, Lei Luo took the Hiranmaru Shikai in his hand, and then raised his hand and an icy frost knife slashed towards Orochimaru. Psychic. Rashomon. A mysterious gate appeared in front of Orochimaru, and the frost blade she cut on it only cut a small gap, and did not pose any threat to Orochimaru. It's so hard, I don't know what material this Rashomon is made of. Lei Luo thought while looking at the small gap on the Rashomon, and the gap on the Rashomon disappeared in the next second. It's kind of interesting that this Rashomon will be repaired automatically. And at this time Orochimaru has also released his ninjutsu. The array of 10,000 serpents. Countless snakes were channeled by Orochimaru, and then swam towards Lei Luo, looking around at the sea that had become snakes. Looking at the dense group of snakes rushing around, Lei Luo couldn't help but feel limited and disgusted, and then Lei Luo directly activated the power of Renren fruit in his body and entered the form of a big Buddha. Lei Luo's figure rose instantly and turned into a golden Buddha. Shockwave. The big Buddha Lei Luo raised his hands, mobilized the chakra in his body to gather on his hands, and slapped the group of snakes in front of him fiercely. Boom. Chapter 151 Orochimaru Defeat. The scroll is in hand. Boom. With Lei Luo's palm shot, the entire ground collapsed, and the group of snakes rushing towards him suffered heavy casualties. Light escape, burning the sky. The golden flame touched by Lei Luo's mouth in the state of the Buddha swept toward the ground in a mighty manner. It really became a sea of fire, and the snakes were instantly melted into ashes. Orochimaru's array of 10,000 snakes was easily cracked by Lei Luo. Otogaku from Otogaku village had already gathered, but they did not dare to move forward when they saw the scene of the two fighting. When the big Buddha Lei Luo spewed out a sea of flames, he immediately retreated from a distance and observed the fighting situation in the field, for fear of being affected. What kind of ninjutsu is this? Orochimaru looked at Lei Luo, who had turned into a big Buddha, with a shocked face. But soon Orochimaru came back to his senses. He knew that this was not the time for him to be shocked, and if he stopped trying to solve Lei Luo, he would probably die here. After all, Lei Luo is too unreasonable, and all kinds of strange ninjutsu abilities emerge in an endless stream, making it difficult to target. The art of psychic. Orochimaru slapped the ground with a palm, and the ferocious 10,000 snakes were channeled out. Orochimaru, why are you calling me out again? Is the Matsuri ready? One snake said to Orochimaru. Orochimaru said sternly, stop talking nonsense, rush up to me and kill that guy. Wan Shi looked at Orochimaru with a fierce look, and didn't dare to say anything. He turned his head and attacked the great Buddha, Lei Luo. Just as he was about to rush in front of Lei Luo, his tail was raised high and swiped towards Lei Luo. Ha ha, good time. Lei Luo, who was transformed into a big Buddha, laughed twice, watching Wan Snake's tail without dodging. He directly opened his mouth and arms and hugged Wan Snake's tail in his arms. Boom! The impact of Wan Snake's tail was very strong, but it only made the Buddha Lei Luo take a step back and immediately stopped. Ah! Ha! The great Buddha Lei Luo used his chakra to hold Wan Snake's tail with all his strength, but Wan Snake struggled frantically but to no avail. Next, under the terrified eyes of everyone, the great Buddha Lei Luo grabbed Wan Snake's tail and turned it around. Boom! 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 Wan Snake was swung back and forth by Lei Luo's tail, and the ground was full of pits, and Wan Snake's body was dripping with flesh and blood. He kept roaring in pain, but he couldn't do anything. Until there was another, boom, Lei Luo threw Wan Shi out. Looking at the great Buddha Lei Luo, Wan Shi was full of panic, and took the initiative to relieve the psychic, and went back to Raichi Cave covered in bruises. After watching Wan Snake for hours, Lei Luo set his sights on Orochimaru again. With a grasp of the void, a lightsaber condensed in the hands of the great Buddha Lei Luo, and then threw it directly towards Orochimaru like a javelin. Before Orochimaru could dodge, he was directly pierced by the lightsaber and pinned to the ground. But the pinned Orochimaru opened his mouth and spat out, and a whole Orochimaru was spat out. Orochimaru felt the little chakra left in his body, and said helplessly to the big Buddha Lei Luo-kun, you won, stop, kill me and you won't get anything. Then Orochimaru opened his mouth and spat out 2 scrolls, and continued, these 2 are what you want, stop. Lei Luo lifted the form of the big Buddha and returned to its original state. He walked slowly to Orochimaru and stood still, and took the scroll from Orochimaru's hand. It's good to be like this earlier. You have to be beaten before you hand it over. Lei Luo said disdainfully, I just finished warming up and you surrendered. It's really boring. Orochimaru's face turned blue and white, but he didn't say anything. Lei Luo opened the 2 scrolls and took a look, and found that it was indeed what he wanted. Then he put away the scroll of the improved Impure World Reincarnation, and threw it to the Raichi Cave Psychic Scroll after he signed his name. Orochimaru. At this moment, Jiraiya arrived late and appeared in the field in an instant. How is it, Lei Luo-kun, are you okay? Jiraiya asked Lei Luo, but her eyes kept drifting to Orochimaru. Lei Luo smiled and said, of course I'm fine, you should worry about Orochimaru. Jiraiya sneered, then said to Orochimaru, Orochimaru, come back to the village with me, now the Hokage is Tsunade, she will definitely not be difficult for you. Orochimaru sneered and replied, Jiraiya, you're still so naive, I'm a Konoha S-class missing nin, it's impossible for me to go back. And you never know what I'm after. Jiraiya was instantly excited when Orochimaru said that. Orochimaru, you. But before Jiraiya could say anything, Orochimaru went underground and left. Jiraiya was about to catch up, but was stopped by Lei Luo. Okay, Lord Jiraiya, stop chasing, you won't be able to catch up. And Orochimaru is impossible to meet in the village, he has his pursuits, and the village has the rules of the village. Listening to Lei Luo's words, Jiraiya sighed and said, well, maybe you're right. It's true that I never knew Orochimaru. I remember him as the same Konoha Sannin who fought Hanzo together. That's it, have you got what you want? Lei Luo nodded and replied, I've got what I want. Lord Jiraiya, where are you going next? Jiraiya shook his head, and now he has no goals for now. Then why don't you go back to Konoha first? Lei Luo said to Jiraiya, now that Minato's children have grown up, you haven't seen him for many years. Naruto. Jiraiya's eyes showed a hint of reminiscence, then nodded and replied, okay, then I'll go back to the village first. Lei Luo looked at the ruined Otogakur village around, and said to Jiraiya, Lord Jiraiya, we should go, it is not suitable to stay here any longer. Jiraiya nodded and walked directly outside the village of Otogakur. Half a month later, Lei Luo and Jiraiya have returned to Konoha's gate. At Konoha's door, Jiraiya couldn't help but sigh, it's been a long time since I came back. Then Lei Luo and Jiraiya walked into Konoha. The ninja guarded by Konoha were familiar with both of them. They respectfully shouted, Lord Jiraiya, Lord Lei Luo, and then let them in. Let's go. Lord Jiraiya, go to my place first. Naruto was adopted by me and has always lived with me. Lei Luo said to Jiraiya. Jiraiya shook her head and said, I want to walk around the village first, and then I'll go look for you at your place. After saying that, he immediately left. Chapter 152 Jiraiya's Induction. Head to Raichi Cave. 152. Jiraiya's Induction. Head to Raichi Cave. Jiraiya wandered the streets, familiar with the changes in the village. This meatball shop is still there. I remember their meatballs taste good. And this pub, I remember drinking too much and touching Tsunade before, and was beaten and lay in hospital for 2 months, when Orochimaru was still there. Ichiraku Ramen, I used to like to come here when Minato was there. Quote. Jiraiya looked for a small shop where she still had some impressions, and the memories intertwined in her mind, recalling the past. Oh, forget it, I don't want that anymore, I'll have to talk to Tsunade when I get back. Jiraiya shook her head, shook off her cluttered thoughts, and walked towards the Hokage building. But just as Jiraiya turned the corner, he felt that he saw a familiar voice and shadow, a voice and shadow that he never forgot, and he immediately chased after him. But it turned out that there was no one there. Am I wrong? That's right. Minato is already gone, how could it be him? Jiraiya sighed, turned and walked towards the Hokage building. Just after Jiraiya left, a voice and shadow suddenly appeared in the position just now, looking at Jiraiya's back and muttering, I'm sorry, Teacher Jiraiya, I can't see you yet. This figure is Minato. Konoha Village, Hokage Building. Jiraiya habitually turned into Hokage's office through the window, looked at Tsunade who was processing documents at his desk, and said with a big laugh, ha ha ha, Tsunade, I'm back. Tsunade glanced up at Jiraiya without any emotion, and said, oh, Jiraiya, why are you back? Jiraiya smiled and replied, I came back with Lei Luo-kun. Tsunade heard the words and asked, oh, Lei Luo-kun is back too. Has he succeeded in his sage art practice on Mount Myoboku? When Jiraiya heard Tsunade's question, her mood instantly sank, and she said, that kid Lei Luo is a monster. He learned and mastered Mount Myoboku sage art perfectly in half a year. Tsunade was not too surprised. After all, it seemed that Lei Luo had only spent half a year learning Shikatsu forest sage art. Jiraiya continued, that boy Lei Luo also defeated Orochimaru and won the contract scroll of Raichi Cave. Tsunade was a little surprised now and asked, have you met Orochimaru? Where did you meet? Jiraiya replied, well, it's in a small ninja village called Otogakur Village in Tien no Country. Otogakur Village. Tsunade took note of the place and asked Anbu to investigate it after preparation. Then Tsunade turned to Jiraiya and asked, now that you're back, do you want to take a class of students? Nani? Bring students. Jiraiya was a little surprised when she heard the words, but she waved her hand immediately, forget it, it's too troublesome, and it also delayed me from collecting materials. Tsunade listened to Jiraiya's words, with black lines all over his head, clenched his fists and bit Kiba and said, if you tell me to take materials in front of me again, I will let you lie in the hospital for 3 months and take good materials. Hearing this, Jiraiya touched her ribs unconsciously, and said with a smirk, just kidding, isn't it just taking students, I'll take it. Tsunade loosened his clenched fists and replied, don't worry, I didn't let you take students casually. You can go to the ninja school to see if there are any good ones, and let me know after you've decided. Jiraiya nodded. She didn't want to stay in Hokage's office anymore. She just said a few words, and arranged things for herself. After staying for a while, I guess there will be no time to collect materials in the future. So Jiraiya said, Tsunade, I have nothing to do, I will go first. Leiluo-kun invited me to visit his house, and I haven't seen Naruto for a long time, I have to go see him. Tsunade nodded and replied, well, then you go first, remember to visit the ninja school later. No problem. As soon as the words fell, Jiraiya immediately left the window. Time passed quickly. 1 month passed. Jiraiya visited Naruto, and Leiluo stayed with Yuhi, Yugao, and Rin for a while. There was also a small episode. Yuhi's father, Shinku Yuhi, came to the door and asked Leiluo when he was going to have the wedding. This question stumped Leiluo. Before he knew it, the 3 girls had been with him for so long, and he really had to give them an explanation, but Leiluo felt that he was not ready, so he faltered in front of Shinku Yuhi. Well, after Otsutsuki Kagaya is resolved, I will marry them. Leiluo thought to himself. But if he wants to solve Otsutsuki Kagaya, his own strength is enough, so now Leiluo still has to learn the sage art of Raichi Cave first, and then integrate the sage art of the 3 holy places, complete the system tasks, and improve his ability. So, after a month of rest, Leiluo is ready to go to Raichi Cave to study sage art. I don't know if the White Snake Immortal can talk as well as the other 2. If it doesn't work, I can only force the White Snake Immortal to hand over the cultivation method of Raichi Cave sage art. With my current strength, I should have no problem dealing with the White Snake Immortal. Go to Raichi Cave or go through the reverse psychic technique. I hope to summon a more obedient snake and save trouble. So Leiluo found an unoccupied place in Konoha and used the technique of psychic. Boom! A familiar big snake appeared in front of Leiluo. As soon as this big snake appeared, he obviously didn't understand his own situation. He opened his mouth and shouted, Orochimaru, why did you summon me again? Last time I was injured so badly, and I didn't get the Matsuri that I owe me, so I won't do it this time. This guy is the snake. Wan Shi found that he had said so much and no one responded, but he lowered his head and found Leiluo, who was looking at him mockingly. I fell into a state of panic all of a sudden, thinking of the scene where Leiluo grabbed his tail and threw it around in Odogakur village before, and couldn't help trembling. How are you? Leiluo couldn't help laughing when he saw Wan Shi's scared look. He didn't expect it to be such a coincidence that Wan Shi was summoned. When he was in Odogakur village, he didn't deliberately throw the snakes around, it was just a matter of convenience. Well, that's right, it's just handy. Leiluo smiled and said to Wan Shi, don't be afraid, I'm calling you out this time because I have something to do with you. As long as you are obedient, I won't beat you. Wan Shi looked at the smile on Leiluo's face, as if seeing a demon. He was really scared by Leiluo's beating. So Wan Shi said to Leiluo, Sir, if you have anything, please tell me. Leiluo replied loudly, after you released the channeling and returned to Raichi Cave, you channeled me backwards, do you hear me? No problem. As soon as the words fell, Wan Shi immediately released the psychic and returned to Raichi Cave, with a feeling that he couldn't wait for the rest of his life after a catastrophe. Leiluo couldn't help laughing again. Chapter 153 Raichi Cave. Sim Kiba. 153. Raichi Cave. Sim Kiba. After Wan Snake was released from the channeling and returned to Raichi Cave, he immediately used the reverse channeling technique to channel Leiluo. Boom! A puff of smoke dissipated, and Leiluo's figure appeared in Raichi Cave. Is this Raichi Cave? Leiluo looked at everything around him and found that it was dark and the visibility was extremely low. As expected of Raichi Cave, it seems that it is indeed an underground cave, and in this dark environment, only snakes can survive here. Lei Luo remembers that if Raichi Cave wants to learn sage art, there will be 3 tests, namely appetite test, intelligence test, and demonic illusion test. But these tests are like pediatrics. Except for people like Orochimaru whose soul is severely damaged and unable to resist demonic illusion, as long as others can successfully enter Raichi Cave, these 3 tests can be successfully passed. But if you want to take the test, you have to see the White Snake Immortal first. So Lei Luo said to Wan Qi, take me to see the White Snake Immortal now. Wan Snake nodded and took the lead in swimming towards the depths of Raichi Cave. Lei Luo looked at the countless snakes lurking in the darkness, and hissing noises came and went. Lei Luo knew that if the snakes hadn't led the way now, these snakes would definitely swarm up and tear anyone who broke into Raichi Cave. Bite and devour. Actually, this should be considered as an entry test for Raichi Cave. If you don't even have the strength to meet the White Snake Immortal, how can you be qualified to learn sage art? Lei Luo thought to himself. At this moment, Lei Luo suddenly felt a ferocious and cruel aura swept towards him, and he forgot to see that a yuhi-colored one-eyed python was blocking their path. Shin Kiba, what are you doing? Wan Qi asked Shin Kiba who was blocking the way. Lei Luo heard the name shouted by Wan Qi. He remembered some information about the yuhi-colored one-eyed python. Shin Kiba is deep in the lair of the most violent serpent group in Raichi Cave, a yuhi-colored one-eyed serpent with reverse scales, and it has extremely powerful sage art chakra in its body. Moreover, he is huge, his movements are quite agile, his attack power is extremely strong, and his speed is extremely fast. Because Shin Kiba lost an eye in battle before, he has become a destructive, headache-inducing guy, a big snake with an extremely violent personality. Even the White Snake Immortal can't handle it. Therefore, the snakes living in Raichi Cave hate it, and no one wants to approach it. However, it is said that Shin Kiba will become docile as long as its reverse scales are removed. Lei Luo thought of this, and immediately looked at Shin Kiba's body, looking for the location of Shin Kiba's inverse scales. Generally speaking, the inverse scales should be in the row of scales under the neck, but where is Shin Kiba's neck? Lei Luo couldn't help but have a headache. At this time, Shin Kiba heard Wan Qi's questioning and said indifferently, "It's nothing, I just don't like this alien human, and I just want to eat it." Shin Kiba's words revealed wanton insolence. When Lei Luo heard Shin Kiba's words, he immediately became unhappy. "I came to Raichi Cave to study sage art. I didn't expect anything to happen. I didn't expect you to want to eat me. It must be a lack of social beatings." Thinking of this, Lei Luo looked at Shin Kiba with bad eyes, but Shin Kiba didn't notice it at all, and was still yelling at Wan Snake. "Wan Qi, I didn't expect you to become so weak now. You are no longer qualified to be my Shin Kiba's opponent. Let me eat this human being." When Wan Qi heard this, he was furious. He wasn't a good-natured snake at first, so he respected Lei Luo because he couldn't beat him. "But you Shin Kiba is just a younger brother in front of me, a defeated general. I didn't expect it to be so arrogant." So without waiting for Lei Luo to shoot, Wan Qi directly attacked Shin Kiba. "My younger brother will always be my younger brother, let you taste my power," Wan Qi thought to himself. Then Lei Luo saw 2 big snakes fighting in front of him. "It's a waste of time. I came here to learn sage art, not to play with snakes." Lei Luo saw that the 2 snakes couldn't tell the difference for a while, and was ready to shoot. Moreover, after fighting Wan Snake, Lei Luo also had experience in dealing with these big snakes, so Lei Luo directly ran chakra and entered the big Buddha mode. Lei Luo, who was incarnated as a golden Buddha, illuminated the darkness in front of him, and also attracted the attention of Wan Snake who was fighting. Wan Qi looked at the big Buddha Lei Luo, and suddenly thought of when he was beaten, his body slammed, and then Shin Kiba seized the opportunity and threw his tail out. "Ha ha ha, Wan Qi, you are no longer my opponent." Shin Kiba laughed wildly. Lei Luo looked at Wan Shi, who was laughing wildly, and slapped it with a slap, sending Shin Kiba flying. Only then did Shin Kiba realize that Lei Luo had undergone such a change, but he didn't take Lei Luo in his eyes, and roared, "Damn human, you dare to attack me, I'm going to eat you." Then he rushed towards Lei Luo suddenly, opened his bloody mouth and bit directly at the head of the great Buddha Lei Luo. Seeing this, the big Buddha Lei Luo didn't dodge, he clasped his hands together, and directly clamped Shin Kiba's snake head in his palms. No matter how hard Shin Kiba struggled, he couldn't get away. "Damn human, I have to eat you." Shin Kiba was obviously a jerk, yet he dared to yell at Lei Luo under such circumstances. Lei Luo couldn't get used to him, so the familiar scene reappeared. I saw that Lei Luo clenched Shin Kiba's snake head with both hands and threw it up. Boom, boom, boom. The sound of Shin Kiba's body hitting the ground was so clear in this dark burrow, and it continued to spread to the depths of Raichi Cave. Wan Shi watched this scene from the side, and couldn't help but gloat over the misfortune. "Little brother Shin Kiba, you really deserve it, you even come to the door and be beaten." In the Raichi Cave, Lei Luo had no idea of putting Shin Kiba to death, that is, he stopped after dozens of back and forth. At this time, Shin Kiba had already fainted and had no ability to resist. And Lei Luo looked at Shin Kiba's body and found that there was no serious injury on it. Shin Kiba's body is actually stronger than Wan's snake, which is a bit interesting. Lei Luo suddenly became interested, ready to subdue Shin Kiba. And if you want to subdue Shin Kiba, you must first pull out his inverse scales and change his temperament. Now that Shin Kiba had fainted and couldn't resist, Lei Luo easily discovered the scales on his body and pulled it out with his right hand. Ah! Shin Kiba, whose scale was removed, suddenly woke up in pain, struggling and rolling on the ground, roaring. At this moment, someone suddenly attacked Lei Luo from behind. Chapter 154-3 Big Snakes Heim. Triple Test. 154. The Three Great Snakes Heim. Triple Test. A woman with a snake face suddenly appeared behind Lei Luo, opened her mouth and bit Lei Luo's neck directly. After Lei Luo pulled out Shin Kiba's inverse scale, he quit the Big Buddha mode and returned to normal. Facing the attack of the snake spirit woman, Lei Luo had no time to dodge and was bitten on the neck. Immediately, I felt a heat flow all over my body was out of control. It was difficult to move, and hallucinations began to appear in front of my eyes. At this moment, Lei Luo directly opened Conqueror's Haki, and a strong momentum surged out from Lei Luo's body, shaking away the snake spirit woman who was biting on his neck, regaining control over his body. Lei Luo turned around and looked at the person who attacked him just now. Although she looks like a girl like a flower like jade, she has long brown hair and wears a golden crown with a golden ball on top of the crown, black-pink eyeshadow extending to the nose, pale skin, wearing a white gown with a chest strap. There are 3 tomo-shaped green ornaments. But her sharp kiba teeth and blue tongue showed that she was definitely not human. And Lei Luo has also recognized her identity. Tanjin Heim. Raichi Cave, known as the elder-level capable confidant of the White Snake Immortal, has an extremely powerful sage art chakra in his body, and is mainly responsible for screening those who enter the Raichi Cave trial. As long as those who fail to pass the trial, with the permission of the White Snake Immortal, they will all be swallowed up. And she has the ability to freely float and invisible in the air, which can make the opponent unable to move and make the opponent hallucinate. And her invisibility can't be perceived, so Lei Luo didn't notice her appearing behind him. It stands to reason that Tanjin Heim, as a high-level executive of Raichi Cave, should be guarding the White Snake Immortal. How could he appear here? Lei Luo was a little puzzled. But what Lei Luo didn't know was that Tanjin Heim was here because of him. Just now, he turned into a big Buddha and threw Shin Kiba around, and the rumbling sound reached the depths of Raichi Cave. Tanjin Heim came out to investigate the situation to see who was so daring to make trouble at Raichi Cave. When she came out, she happened to see the big Buddha Lei Luo pull out Shin Kiba's inverse scales, and then restore it to its original state, and Sunjanheim was not sure whether he was Lei Luo's opponent, so he sneaked behind Lei Luo and attacked. He, human strength is not bad. Sunjanheim looked at Lei Luo and said. Lei Luo looked at Tuonjanheim and said, you are too weak to come to Ryachi Cave. You should be Tuonjanheim, one of the snake heims under the White Snake Immortal constellation. Oh, Sunjanheim raised his eyes and said, human, have you heard of me? What's your purpose in coming to Ryachi Cave? Lei Luo opened his mouth and replied, I came to Ryachi Cave, naturally, to practice sage art. Tanjanheim heard the words and replied, okay, although I don't know how you got to Ryachi Cave, but since you can come here, you are considered a lucky person and naturally have the opportunity to practice sage art. However, there are 3 tests before practicing sage art. If you fail, we will eat you. Lei Luo didn't change his face when he heard the words, and said lightly, okay, let's lead the way. So Tuonjanheim took Lei Luo toward the depths of Ryachi Cave. Someone led the way, and Wanshi didn't need to follow, and just slipped away. Before Zanjanheim brought Lei Luo to an underground temple, 2 more women came out of the temple. The one on the left also looks like a flower-like girl, with long green hair, wearing a golden crown, with a golden ball on top of the crown, golden longitudinal pupils, black yuhi eyeshadow extending to the nose, pale skin, wearing a white gown with a tomo-shaped green ornament on the chest, sharp kiba teeth and a blue tongue. This person is Tien Shinshinheim, one of the 3 snake heims of Ryachi Cave. And the one on the right looks like a flower-like loli, with dark blue long hair, wearing a golden crown, with golden balls on top of the crown, golden elongated pupils, black yuhi eyeshadow extending to the nose, pale skin, with turquoise tomo earrings. Wearing a white gown with a single tomo green ornament on the chest, sharp kiba teeth and a pink tongue. This person is Shikishima Heim, one of the 3 snake heims of Ryachi Cave. The 3 snakes heim stood at the entrance of the temple and said to Lei Luo, we are the 3 of us responsible for this test. As long as you pass the test, you can enter the temple and learn sage art with the white snake fairy. Don't forget, if you fail the test, the 3 of us will eat you up. Now the test is about to begin, are you ready? Lei Luo opened his mouth and replied, come on, it's already ready. Ryachi Cave, the appetite test, is in charge of Heim, Tien Shinshin. I saw Tien Shinshinheim waved his right hand, a castle appeared in front of the temple, and then said to Lei Luo, go in, as long as you can come out from the other side of the castle, you will be considered successful in this test. Quote. Lei Luo walked directly into the castle without hesitation. The moment he stepped into the castle, Lei Luo felt instantly different, as if he had stepped into another space. There are all kinds of delicacies in the castle, and Rin is dazzling. But Lei Luo's heart didn't fluctuate at all. For Lei Luo, who has seen thousands of delicious food in his previous life, the food in this Hokage world is really interesting. Lei Luo kept striding, walked directly through the entire castle, and came out from the other side. So soon, Tien Shinshinheim's face was a little gloomy. Lei Luo passed this test, and she had no chance to eat Lei Luo. Not bad, I passed the first test so quickly. Aikigoshima Heim said with a chuckle, then it's the second test. The second test is called the intelligence test, and I am responsible for this test. I'm not difficult for you. I'll give you 3 simple questions. As long as you answer them, this level will be passed. Lei Luo nodded and said, okay, please come up with a question. Shigdeo Heim said it was easy, but in fact the questions were very difficult, and there were still pitfalls, but Lei Luo still answered them one by one. Every time he answered correctly, Aikigoshima Heim's face turned gloomy. Looks like I passed this test too, Lei Luo said with a smile. Although Shigashima Heim was very unwilling, she did not dare to break the rules of the White Snake Immortal. Next is the third test, the demonic illusion test hosted by Tanjanheim. Tanjanheim walked forward slowly, stood in front of Lei Luo, and said, the next step is the third test, as long as you can get rid of my demonic illusion, this test will be passed, and you will be able to enter God Temple has learned sage art. Quote. Okay, come on, Lei Luo replied. In the next second, a psychedelic divine light burst out from Tangenheim's eyes, which instantly enveloped Lei Luo. Chapter 155_White Snake Fairy. Successful practice. Lei Luo, who was enveloped by the divine light in Tangenheim's eyes, fell into a trance in an instant, and hallucinations appeared in front of him. The demonic illusion released by Tuangenheim is a demonic illusion at the sage art level, and even Lei Luo was unable to get rid of it for a while. Lei Luo suddenly found that he seemed to have returned to a previous life, without the memory of so many years of living in the world of Hokage, and forgot that he was undergoing the triple test of Raichi Cave, and the system in Lei Luo's mind did not give any hints. Lei Luo turned on the computer familiarly, and watched a few episodes of the drama, but they all felt a little boring, so he found his favorite Hokage ninja anime and started to rewatch it. Just when the familiar BGM of Hokage ninja sounded, Lei Luo suddenly came to a realization. His memory was instantly unsealed, and he recalled everything. As expected of Raichi Cave's test, he will extend the illusion based on his deepest memory, and everything is so real. But since I've reacted, it won't affect me anymore. To unlock demonic illusion, all you need to do is disrupt your chakra flow. For demonic illusion of this level, it should be impossible to crack just the chakra that disturbs him. Lei Luo directly called out Godzilla's power and entered the Godzilla-tailed beast coat mode. When Godzilla's coat armor appeared outside Lei Luo's body, Sungenheim's demonic illusion was also unlocked at the same time. Tangenheim looked at Lei Luo, who woke up in front of him and turned into an armored warrior. His face was full of shock. What the hell are you? Lei Luo disarmed demonic illusion. He exited Godzilla's coat mode again, smiled and replied to Tangenheim, me. I'm just an ordinary human. After listening to Lei Luo's words, Tangenheim also came back to his senses and said, no matter what you are, it doesn't matter. You have also successfully passed this third test. Come on, let's go into the temple and meet the White Snake Immortal. After talking about Tangenheim and other three snakes, Heim walked into the temple. Although they didn't have the chance to eat Lei Luo, they didn't feel any pity anymore. Based on the state of Lei Luo when he entered Godzilla's coat mode, even if it was in normal battles, they are not necessarily Lei Luo's opponents. Lei Luo looked at Heim, the three major snakes who entered the temple, and immediately followed him in, finally being able to learn Raichi Cave sage art. Walking into the center of the temple, Lei Luo finally saw the appearance of the White Snake Immortal. Orange hair and yellow pupils, a green opal on the chest, a purple ribbon as a forehead, an army green horn-shaped ornament on the front of the forehead, a euhynite pearl on the top of the head, and a mouth a pipe with an extra long body and 2 golden rings on the tail. White Snake Immortal. Sungenheim stood in front of the throne and shouted respectfully to the White Snake Immortal who was sitting cross-legged on the throne. The other two snakes, Heim, stood on both sides of the throne, like serving maids. The White Snake Immortal heard Tangenheim's call, opened his eyes, and the snake pupil stared at Tangenheim and asked, Tangenheim, why are you calling me? Sungenheim pointed to the human and replied respectfully, White Snake Immortal, this human wants to learn the sage art of Raichi Cave, and successfully pass the test of the three of us. Oh, the White Snake Immortal heard the words and turned to stare at Lei Luo for a while. Then I saw the white scales on her body flashing light, and the next moment she turned into a kind old grandmother, like the three snake Heim, turned into a human shape. Then looked at Lei Luo with interest and said, Human, I see traces of Shikatsu Forest and Mount Myoboku sage art in you. Your ambition is not small, you actually want to learn all the sage art of the three holy places. Lei Luo replied in a loud voice, there is no ambition, it's just to become stronger. Does it mean that immortal white snake, because I learned the sage art of the other two holy places, you violated the rules you set yourself? He. The White Snake Immortal smiled and narrowed her eyes. looking like a kind old grandmother, and said, "I haven't been so careful yet. Since you can come to Raichi Cave and pass the test, naturally it is the fate of Raichi Cave." Quote, "You want to learn sage art, I will teach you naturally. Besides, I also want to see if you have learned the sage art of the 3 holy lands, what different changes will there be?" Then the white snake immortal changed the subject, became serious, and said, "You must know that our Raichi Cave sage art study is different from other holy places. Our sage art chakra and natural energy at Raichi Cave is more violent than other holy places, so you humans simply cannot absorb it on your own. So I will inject sage art chakra into you, make you feel it, and if you fail to feel it, then you will turn into a snake. The practice of Raichi Cave sage art has only one chance. It will be more difficult than the practice of other holy places. Are you ready?" Lei Luo said in a deep voice, "Don't worry, immortal white snake. Since I came to Raichi Cave to study sage art, I am ready to face all dangers. Please do it." "Very good." The white snake immortal was very happy to see Lei Luo's resolute attitude. "As long as you have this attitude, you may succeed, then I will start injecting chakra into you." As soon as the words fell, immortal white snake's neck suddenly stretched, and then bit Lei Luo's neck. Sage art chakra injected into Lei Luo's body through her sharp kiba. Lei Luo suddenly felt a violent energy sprinting through his entire body. Just when the white snake immortal loosened the tip of kiba and returned to its original state, Lei Luo immediately sat cross-legged on the ground, feeling the sage art chakra of Raichi Cave in his body. Looking at Lei Luo, who was in a state of cultivation, the white snake immortal stared at him for a while, and found that Lei Luo had not changed much. She knew that this human being could be successful in cultivation this time. So the white immortal returned to its original body, and the huge snake body sat cross-legged on the throne, falling into a state of slumber. The 3 big snakes Haim didn't have such eyes, and standing under the throne, he didn't dare to ask the white snake immortal, so he could only stare at Lei Luo. After a long time, the chakra fluctuations on Lei Luo's body gradually subsided, but there was no change in his body. Only then did the 3 snakes Haim determine that Lei Luo should have successfully practiced. Sure enough, at this moment, a touch of emerald green eyeshadow appeared on Lei Luo's eye sockets, and it was the perfect sage mode again. Successfully entered the perfect sage mode once. The three snakes, Haim, fell into shock. Lei Luo opened his eyes, a divine light flashed. Feeling the power in his body, he was sure that he had successfully cultivated. Then Lei Luo stood up, exited sage mode, and said aloud to the white snake immortal on the throne, "Thank you, white snake immortal." Chapter 156 Sage Art Fusion. Mission completed. Immortal white snake heard Lei Luo's voice, but without opening her eyes, she said directly, "Since you have successfully practiced, you can leave." And then stopped talking. Lei Luo turned around and walked out of the temple. In Raichi Cave, the only person he could see in his eyes was the white snake immortal. Although Haim, the 3 major snakes, is also a high-level man in Raichi Cave, he was not taken seriously by Lei Luo at all. Oh, by the way, there is Shin Kiba who can thank Lei Luo for his interest. Therefore, Lei Luo, who walked out of the temple, did not immediately contact the reverse psychic technique, but turned on the 5 vision omnipotence to find the trace of Shin Kiba. Although Shin Kiba's current strength doesn't seem to be stronger than Wan Shi's, but it is only slightly weaker, but Lei Luo knows that Shin Kiba's potential is much stronger than Wan Shi's. And Shin Kiba's inverse scales have been pulled out by him, and now he is still lying in his ninja bag. Shin Kiba, who has changed his temperament, is still worth taking. With all 5 visions, Lei Luo easily found Shin Kiba in a deep cave in Raichi Cave. In the caves around Shin Kiba, there are no other snakes. After all, Shin Kiba, who had reverse scales before, was too cruel, and no snakes were willing to approach. Lei Luo came to Shin Kiba's cave. He kept walking and went straight in. Entering the cave, he saw Shin Kiba licking his wounds. "Human, what are you doing here?" Shinkiba looked at Lei Luo, who entered the cave, very alert. Although his inverse scales have been removed by Lei Luo, it does not mean that he is no longer aggressive. He. Lei Luo said with a smile. It's very simple, of course I came here because of you. I wonder if you are willing to obey the contract and fight for me. Shinkiba was furious when he heard Lei Luo's words, and replied, impossible, it's impossible for me to listen to a human being. I'm not that guy from Wan Snake. Lei Luo looked at Shinkiba, who was grinning at Kiba with a fierce look in front of him. His expression did not change at all, and said lightly, Shinkiba, don't think that I came to ask you, just to ask for your consent. I'm just here to inform you. If you don't obey me, I don't mind letting you taste my abilities again. Hearing Lei Luo's words, Shinkiba's body trembled, but he was still unconvinced and wanted to speak hard. Lei Luo didn't talk nonsense, and directly mobilized chakra to enter the state of the Buddha. Lei Luo, who turned into a Buddha, looked down at Shinkiba and asked, how is it? Do you agree? It seems that as long as Shinkiba says no, Lei Luo will immediately teach him a lesson. Seeing this, Shinkiba naturally knew that Lei Luo was here for real, not playing with him. He who was pulled out of the back scale also can't be iron, and said quickly, I agree. Lei Luo exited the state of the Buddha, and said with a smile, very good, when I call you, you must remember to come out for me obediently. Shinkiba looked at the smiling Lei Luo, but felt a chill in the snake's body, and nodded quickly. Watching this scene, Lei Luo released the reverse psychic art with satisfaction and returned to Konoha. Shinkiba watched Lei Luo leave, and just breathed a sigh of relief, when he realized that someone was channeling it. Just wanted to refuse the channeling, but it found that it was Lei Luo who channeled it, and hurriedly accepted it. Boom! A puff of smoke cleared, and Shinkiba appeared in the village of Konoha. Lei Luo looked at Shinkiba, who appeared, narrowed his eyes, and said, Shinkiba, you are a bit slow, you are not trying to reject my psychic. There's no such thing, Shinkiba quickly replied. This is the first time I've been channeled, and I'm just not used to it. Lei Luo smiled and replied, then you have to get used to it as soon as possible. In fact, Lei Luo doesn't lack Shinkiba's combat power, but since he has already pulled out his inverse scales, let's tune it up. And in the future, if that junior signs a contract with Shinkiba, it's easy to be obedient. Okay, then you can go back, Lei Luo said to Shinkiba. Shinkiba couldn't wait to disarm the psychic and return to Raichi Cave. After Shinkiba left, Lei Luo didn't go home immediately. It's so quiet here, and it's quite suitable for cultivation. Why don't you try the sage art that integrates the three holy places? Do it when you think of it. Lei Luo is not a screeching person. Lei Luo first turned on his 5-vision omnipotence, looked around, and found that there was no trace of anyone coming. So Lei Luo sat down directly with his knees crossed and began to try to fuse the 3 sage art chakras in his body. Sure enough, Lei Luo thought to himself. He has successfully mastered the 3 sacred places sage art, and it is much easier to integrate than when he only mastered Shikatsu Forest and Mount Myoboku sage art before. Lei Luo just mobilized 3 types of sage art chakras, and they have a tendency to merge. Now for Lei Luo, as long as the master has a good fusion ratio of sage art chakras, it is fine. It seems that the sage art of these 3 holy places does have an inexplicable connection, but I am afraid that the 3 immortals are not clear about this connection. Lei Luo's attempt. After the time he spent practicing on Mount Myoboku, Lei Luo would bring a bunch of seal scrolls with him every time he went out, which sealed enough food and avoided the back on the old road of eating bugs again. After continuous attempts, Lei Luo gradually found the ratio of sage art chakra fusion, which is very close. During this period of time, Lei Luo had to go to the 3 holy places to absorb natural energy and replenish sage art chakra. It should be successful this time. Lei Luo thought to himself. He had a feeling that this ratio would definitely be successful. Sure enough, the sage art chakras were successfully blended together this time. After Lei Luo fused all the sage art chakras, a sense of lightness filled Lei Luo's body. This feeling is really amazing. Lei Luo couldn't help but be a little obsessed. Try the sage mode that combines these three sage art. So Lei Luo initiated the fusion of the new sage art chakra and entered the new sage mode. Lei Luo's eye socket, but on top of the golden eyeshadow, there was a little bit of fluorescent light like a rainbow. Lei Luo opened his eyes and felt the terrifying energy contained in the seemingly peaceful sage art chakra within himself. Very good. This new sage mode is called Sanxianliu Sage Mode. At this moment, the system prompt sounded in Lei Luo's mind. Ding! Congratulations to the host for completing the task, the real sage art. Congratulations to the host for learning the sage art of the three holy lands, and successfully integrating and creating the sage mode of the three immortals. Congratulations to the host for getting the quest reward, God level lottery point *1. This is a double happiness for Lei Luo. Lei Luo couldn't help laughing twice, and then shouted the frequently said words to the system in his mind. System, I want to draw a lottery. Chapter 157 _ Back in Time. The system heard Lei Luo's call, and did not beep with him. A system ***** flew out and appeared in Lei Luo's mind. Lei Luo looked at it with confidence, and saw that the 6 prizes above were S-Class Item, Mechanical Godzilla. S-Class Equipment, Taigu * Thor's Wrath, Admiral. S-Class Weapon, Deviant's Sword. S-Class Skill, Back in Time. S-Class Item, Cute Girl Potion. S-Class Items, Devil Fruit * Childlike Fruit. Mechanical Godzilla, from the world of Godzilla, is a Godzilla-like robot with an artificial diamond coating that is immune to fire and heat. Even more terrifying is that his arms and body are covered with countless weapons, tranquilizer missiles, plasma bombs, bliss missiles and so on. But the most terrifying thing is Mecha Godzilla's head. In addition to the mega light cannon that can be fired from the mouth, there are also laser cannons in the eyes and high-power microwave light cannons on both shoulders, which are very terrifying. Taigu * Thor's Wrath, Admiral, from the world of Yuhi's eyes, is a Taigu with the ability to manipulate thunderclouds, which can summon thunder and lightning to attack the enemy. It has a high attack power and a wide range, and it can paralyze the opponent and make it immobile after hitting the opponent. The Deviant's Sword, from the world of the Holy Grail series, has superpower and is a veritable sword that cuts the world. And the strongest state of the Deviation Sword is called the Star of Heaven and Earth Deviation Development. In this state, the deviated sword will be divided into 3 circular Jinchuriki, column-shaped blades that rotate respectively. The pseudo-space rupture caused by the initial opening sword Aya will form an attack similar to a space-time fault and smash all enemies. Basically, it can be regarded as an indefensible attack. Step back in time, from the world of League of Legends. This skill comes from the ability of the Time Guardian Kirin in the League of Legends world. As long as the master has this skill, he can inscribe the Time Rune for protection. This rune can be engraved on you or your teammates. Within 5 minutes of the Time Rune being activated, as long as you receive fatal damage, your state will be reversed back to when it was intact, just like Sharingan's forbidden technique Izanagi same. But Sharingan will be permanently closed after 1 use, and you only need to wait a year to use it back in time. Moniang Potion, from the world of Moniang and Heim, what creatures do you like? As long as you feed this potion to them, they will become powerful Moniang or Heim. For example, if you feed it to a cat, it's a cat girl fighting Heim, and if you feed it to a rabbit, it's a rabbit girl fighting Heim and so on. Devil Fruit * Childlike Fruit, from the world of One Piece, the user stops growing immediately after eating the fruit. As long as it is touched with a hand, all that is touched by the creature will completely disappear from the world, and can make a contract, so that it cannot act freely according to its thoughts and obey orders. In fact, the so-called complete disappearance means that the person who has been turned into a toy will be erased from the memory of others. Toys have their own consciousness, their own emotions, and the memories of their lives, and they will become toys permanently when the capable person is conscious. Lei Luo stared at these prizes for a while, and couldn't wait to start the lottery. The asterisk in his mind turned. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining the S-level skill, back in time. Ha 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 ha. Lei Luo couldn't stop laughing when he saw the prize he had drawn, which was the one he wanted the most among the 6 prizes. The time rune inscribed by using time back is comparable to that of Izanagi, and the most important thing is that this time inscription can be inscribed on teammates. Originally, Lei Luo was worried about the safety of Yuhi, Yugao, and Rin. Now he can inscribe the time rune on all 3 women. Although the time rune can only be used once a year for the 3 women, that is enough. After a long time, Lei Luo finally calmed down his joyful mood. Now things are all over. Not only have the 3 major sage art been learned, and even got the god-level skill of going back in time. In addition, the improved version of Impure World Reincarnation has also been obtained from Orochimaru, and now you can back home. I don't know how Minato's investigation is. My awakening light can be used again. I don't know if he found Kushina and his own body. Forget it, go back and ask him to find out. Lei Luo directly got up and walked towards the Konoha village. Konoha village, Lei Luo's psychic beast shop. I'm back, Lei Luo shouted as he walked into the psychic beast shop. Lei Luo-kun, welcome back. Yuhi heard Lei Luo's voice and immediately came out from behind the counter. Lei Luo hugged Yuhi directly and gave a romantic French wet kiss. After a long time, Lei Luo let go of Yuhi when she was about to faint from hypoxia. Yuhi gasped heavily. Yuhi slapped Lei Luo's shoulder, and said, Lei Luo-kun, you're dead. Once you come back, you'll make a mess, and there are still people watching. Lei Luo looked at the shy Yuhi. He smiled and said, there's no one there. Aren't you the only one in the store now? Yuhi pointed to the counter, pouted and said, isn't there another one there? Lei Luo was a little puzzled. His 5-vision omnipotent didn't see anyone else in the store. Following the direction Yuhi pointed, Lei Luo saw a cerulean squatting on the counter, covering his eyes with his small hands. Fuck, it turns out to be cerulean, I said no one. Lei Luo couldn't help but complain. Then Lei Luo said to Yuhi, it doesn't matter, it's just cerulean. After all, where have everyone else gone? Yuhi opened his mouth and replied, Rin has gone to work at the hospital, Yugao Anbu has a mission, and Naruto is studying at the ninja school. Then he asked Lei Luo-kun, are you done with your work? How long can you stay here this time? Lei Luo hugged Yuhi in his arms and said softly, my business has been completed, and I won't be going out any more recently. Now I have time to spend more time with you. Then Lei Luo suddenly remembered that he should engrave the time inscription on Yuhi first. He was so addicted to the long kiss that he almost forgot. So Lei Luo said to Yuhi, Yuhi, close your eyes, I have something for you. Yuhi asked softly, Lei Luo-kun, what? Lei Luo replied, you close your eyes first, you will find out later. Yuhi nodded and said, then I'll close my eyes first, but you can't do anything wrong. After saying that, Yuhi closed his eyes. Lei Luo looked at Yuhi, looking for a suitable place to engrave the inscription, and finally was attracted by Yuhi's white collarbone, and decided to engrave the time inscription here. Yuhi was still wondering why Lei Luo-kun didn't tell him to open his eyes for so long, only to realize that Lei Luo had placed his finger on her collarbone. Yuhi resisted the shyness in his heart and didn't open his eyes, then felt Lei Luo's fingers grope on her collarbone for a while, and heard Lei Luo's voice. Yuhi, eyes can be opened. Chapter 158_Naruto graduates. Reverse fate. Yuhi opened his eyes, looked at Lei Luo who was smiling at her, and lowered his head shyly. As a result, when he lowered his head, he saw the time rune on his collarbone. I have to say that the time rune flashes a mysterious atmosphere, even if it is used as a tattoo decoration, it is very beautiful. How is it, Yuhi, do you feel any difference? Lei Luo asked. Yuhi raised his hand and touched the time rune on his collarbone, and asked, Lei Luo-kun, is this the gift you said? Lei Luo nodded and replied, yes, this is called the time rune. After you use chakra to open it, if you receive fatal damage within 5 minutes, this rune will activate the time power it contains. It's like going back in time to get you back where you were before. Quote. So amazing. Yuhi was a little surprised when he heard Lei Luo's words. Then Yuhi took the initiative to hug Lei Luo and kissed him. Lei Luo-kun, thank you. Lei Luo smiled and replied, you and I don't need to be so polite. Since it's only you now, let's close the store first and let's go out for a walk. Yuhi nodded with a smile on his face, very happy to be able to go shopping with Lei Luo. So Lei Luo closed the door and took Yuhi out. Years flies, time flies, 3 years flies by in a flash. And today, it's time to graduate from Naruto Ninja School. Namikaze Minato also returned to the village ahead of schedule, ready to record this important moment with the camera again. For the past 3 years, Namikaze Minato has been running around to investigate Akatsuki's information, as well as his and Kushina's bodies, but little progress has been made. Apart from his investigation that Akatsuki's base is likely to be in the Land of Rain, he didn't get any useful information. And there is no way to find the traces of his and Kushina's bodies. After all, so many years have passed, and he only vaguely remembers that before he was swallowed by death, he seemed to see a dark figure, which was his only clue. But he has been searching in the ninja world for so many years, and there is no information at all about the ninja who may be this shadow. Lei Luo heard the information from Namikaze Minato. He was already certain in his heart. It should be Black Zetsu who took the bodies of Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina. But now is not the chance to destroy Akatsuki, and Lei Luo is not sure if he can keep Black Zetsu. Although Black Zetsu's strength is not worth mentioning to Lei Luo, but his hidden method and ability to escape not easy. Lei Luo must prepare in advance, and only after making sure that everything is safe can he start. Naruto's years in the ninja school are much better than the original book, and under the care of Lei Luo and Rin, he was well nourished when he was a child, and the current Naruto is a head taller than when he graduated from the original book. Moreover, under the training of Lei Luo and the occasional teaching of Minato, Naruto's strength is much stronger than this time in the original work. The multiple shadow clone technique and Rasengan Naruto have already mastered ahead of schedule, and he is still rubbing balls with one hand. In addition to being inferior to the second Jinchuriki column child in terms of shuriken and theoretical achievements, Naruto's combat power is much stronger than that of the second Jinchuriki column child. Uchiha Itachi is also much better than in the original book. His close friend Shisui is a disciple of Lei Luo. The unstable factors of the Uchiha family have been resolved in advance, and he will not defect. Now he is also Anbu's elite, serving as a sub-commander. It can be said that the entire Konoha has undergone a good transformation under the influence of Lei Luo, and it is much stronger than the original work. Uncle Lei Luo, Uncle Flash. Naruto ran out of the ninja school, looking youthful and energetic. For the current Naruto, the graduation exam is also a pediatric subject, and there will be no small stories like the original, and the Konoha forehead is already on his head. Namikaze Minato had noticed when Naruto just walked out of the school gate, and had already pressed the camera shutter to record this moment. Lei Luo looked at Naruto with a smile and said, "Congratulations Naruto, you are a genin from today." Namikaze Minato followed suit. "Congratulations, Naruto." Naruto also nodded excitedly, his mouth never closing his smile. "Let's go. Your Auntie Rin has prepared a lot of food at home today, to celebrate for you, let's go back," Lei Luo said. "Yeah." Naruto cheered and ran directly towards the Lei Luo psychic beast shop. Lei Luo just took a step and was about to follow, but a system prompt suddenly sounded in his mind, making him stop in place. "Ding! Congratulations to the host for triggering the mission. Reversing Fate. Reversing the fate. Uzumaki Naruto, as the son of fate of the Hokage ninja world, the reincarnation of Asura, it is his fate to seal Otsutsuki Kagaya again. As the adoptive father of Uzumaki Naruto, the host has reason to reverse the fate for his son. Please, host, seal kill, subdue Otsutsuki Kagaya before Uzumaki Naruto seals Otsutsuki Kagaya. Task Reward. Seal Otsutsuki Kagaya. Reward God Level Lottery Points 1. Kill Otsutsuki Kagaya. Reward God Level Lottery Points 2. Conquer Otsutsuki Kagaya. Reward God Level Lottery Points 3. Lei Luo was surprised when he saw the task content prompted by the system. What the hell? How could this mission be triggered suddenly? The system replied, there are two reasons why the host will trigger this person's mission. The first reason, as mentioned in the quest content prompt, is that the host is Uzumaki Naruto's adoptive father. The second reason is because when Uzumaki graduated from Naruto Ninja School, the fate of Destiny Child began to turn. That's why the host suddenly triggered this mission at this time. The system's explanation made Lei Luo understand the reason for triggering this task, but it is not easy to complete this task. If you want to deal with Otsutsuki Kagaya, whether it is to seal, kill or conquer, you must first release Otsutsuki Kagaya. To release Otsutsuki Kagaya, you must rely on Rinnegan to summon Geto Mazo, demonic statue of the outer path, and then absorb the power of the nine-tailed beasts through the magic dragon 9 seals. The magic dragon 9 seals did Lei Luo have it, but Rinnegan and the nine-tailed beast Lei Luo did not. Looks like it's time to go to the land of rain. Lei Luo murmured inwardly. Uncle Lei Luo, hurry up, what are you doing standing there? Naruto's cry woke up Lei Luo, this task is not so easy to complete, and now I don't need to think too much. So Lei Luo responded, come here, don't be so anxious. Then Lei Luo strode forward and walked towards the psychic beast shop. Chapter 159 Go to the Land of Rain. As in the original work, Naruto's lead class, Jonin, is still Kakashi, and he is still the familiar 7th class. The reason for this is that Tsunade asked Lei Luo's opinion before the arrangement. Now Kakashi is not dragged down by Sharingan, specializing in Raiden, Thunder Style, Ninjutsu and Hatake swordsmanship, with other attribute ninjutsu as a support, and Rin was rescued by Lei Luo. Kakashi is not as immersed in self as in the original work. In the midst of guilt and grief, he did not fall into a state of decadence, and his strength was much stronger than in the original work. That's why Lei Luo decided to still use Kakashi as Naruto's leader Jonin, and Kakashi is Minato's disciple, so he will definitely protect Naruto very well. Naruto has already started the mission, and Lei Luo can also prepare for the system mission to reverse his fate. Time to set off for the Land of Rain. Lei Luo knew that the Akatsuki base was in the Land of Rain, so he settled down at home, and after getting an exit order from Tsunade, he went to the Land of Rain alone. Bordering the country of rain and the country of fire, it is a small country sandwiched between various countries. The Land of Rain has a natural barrier. The low-lying basin is surrounded by mountains. The unique weather and climate make the Land of Rain a spectacle of the rainy season all year round, and the rain never stops. The outside world knows very little about the Kingdom of Rain. They only know that the country is divided into civil wars, fighting year after year, and the security is very strict, and they are afraid of some spies. The ninja village to which it belongs is a Megakure village. This ninja village has very developed assassination skills, so it often accepts commissions from other countries. The leader of the Rain Country is the legendary ninja, Hanzo of the Salamander, who gave Tsunade, Orochimaru and Jiraiya the title, Konoha Sanin, in the Second Ninja War, and later Pain killed Hanzo of the Salamander, become the leader of the Rain Land. Pain is also the leader of Akatsuki, a person of Rinnegan who owns 6 paths, the ancestor of the legendary Chunin. People in the Kingdom of Rain firmly believe that Pain is a god sent from the sky, and Pain's teammate Conan is an angel. There are 6 people in Pain, all of them are bodies transformed from 6 corpses, and their body is Uzumaki Nagato. To complete the mission, Lei Luo must rely on Rinnegan to summon Geto Mazo, demonic statue of the outer path, and then capture the nine-tailed beast. But Lei Luo, as a person from Konoha village, is naturally inconvenient to capture tailed beasts from other villages, and he also doesn't have Rinnegan, so cooperation with Akatsuki is the only way for Lei Luo. A few days after leaving Konoha, Lei Luo stepped into the territory of the Land of Rain. As soon as he entered the Land of Rain, Lei Luo felt very uncomfortable because he did not like such wet weather. Lei Luo walked all the way through the rainforest and found that there was no trace of anyone. The Land of Rain is a small country with few people, and it often becomes a battlefield for other countries. This is normal now. Lei Luo also understood why. With Lei Luo's speed, it didn't take long before he arrived in front of a Megakure village. But just as Lei Luo arrived here, he was discovered by Nagato in a Megakure village. The Land of Rain, a Megakure village, Central Tower. Today was the time of Akatsuki's rally. Both Kakuzu and Sasori of the Red Sand died in the hands of Lei Luo. Orochimaru had already sentenced Akatsuki, but Uchiha Itachi did not defect. Akatsuki is not as good as in the original book. Great power. Pain ran around with Konan, and finally managed to gather the members of Akatsuki, but their strength was barely enough. Apart from Pain and Konan, only Deidara and Kisame Hoshigaki had some strength. Pain looked at the members gathered in the central tower and was about to announce some future Akatsuki's strategies and goals, when he suddenly frowned, because he found that a man with a very large chakra came from outside a Megakure village, and his strength was very strong. The rain around a Megakure village is filled with Pain's chakra, which is a detection-type ninjutsu, sweetened water style. Rain Tiger Freedom Jutsu, developed by Nagato, and the person perceived by Pain is Lei Luo. Pain, what's wrong? Konan asked, looking at the frowning Yahiko. Pain raised his brows and said lightly, "It's nothing, it's just that an uninvited guest came to a Megakure village. Although his strength is good, if he wants to come to our Megakure village to make trouble, he is going to kill himself." "Leader, let me go," Deidara said excitedly after hearing the words. "I feel a little rusty in the village recently." Pain shook his head lightly and said, "The person who came here didn't hide his figure, so he might not be the enemy." Konan replied, "Then let me go out and see what purpose he has in a Megakure village." Pain nodded, and Konan vanished into pieces of confetti. Now Lei Luo is standing in front of a Megakure village, as if waiting for something. The rain drips from his head but can't touch his body at all, and slides directly from his sides. Lei Luo knew that Pain had a ninjutsu called sweetened water style. Rain Tiger Freedom Jutsu. When he stepped in here, Pain must have found his trail. He wanted to see who Pain would send. Find him. At this moment, countless scraps of paper appeared in front of Lei Luo. The scraps of paper swirled, and when they dissipated, the figure inside was revealed. A lady with purple hair and long legs was Konan. I didn't expect it to be Konan. It seems that Pain has guessed that I didn't come here as an enemy. Lei Luo thought to Konan, who appeared. Outlander, what are you doing here in a Megakure village? Konan asked with a serious look, looking at Lei Luo. Lei Luo said indifferently, I'm not here because of a Megakure village, but to cooperate with you Akatsuki. Konan immediately became nervous when he heard this, looked at Lei Luo and asked, Who the hell are you? Lei Luo chuckled and replied, My name is Lei Luo, you should have my information. Konan replied, Lei Luo. Konoha Village Elite Jonin, who led the team to destroy the Canopy Bridge in the third battle, defeated the Kumogakure Village Abbey combination, and the 3-generation Reikage battle to draw Lei Luo. Lei Luo smiled slightly and replied, That's right, it's me. I'm here this time to work with you Akatsuki. If you're unsure, you can enter and ask Nagato. Konan's pupils shrank when he heard Lei Luo's words. Even if ordinary people knew Akatsuki, they only knew that the leader of Akatsuki was named Pain. But Lei Luo didn't know about the doubt in her heart, she just watched Konan and waited for her to answer. Konan pondered for a while and replied, I'm going to bother you to wait here for a while, I'll ask the leader. Lei Luo smiled and replied, please. Conan turned into confetti and disappeared in front of Lei Luo again. Chapter 160 _ Pain 6 Paths. Chibaku Tensai, heavenly body bursting from the earth. Returning directly to the tower where the Akatsuki members gathered, Conan went to Nagato's hiding place, because Nagato couldn't be exposed right now. Conan, why are you here all of a sudden? Nagato asked in a deep voice, but his exhaustion could be heard in his voice. Rinnegan is strong, it has brought a great burden to Nagato's body. The amount of chakra consumed to maintain the Rinnegan 6 Paths clone is not a small amount. If Nagato is not a member of the Uzumaki family, he is born with a huge amount of chakra. Was probably sucked dry by Rinnegan long ago. Conan looked at Nagato's bony body, and there was a hint of worry in her eyes, but she didn't say it, because she knew Nagato didn't want others to worry about him. Conan replied with a serious face, Nagato, that person from outside the village is Konoha's elite Jonin Lei Luo. He said he has something to cooperate with us Akatsuki, and he doesn't know how to get the information. He knows Pain's back. You are in control. Nagato was startled when he heard Conan's words, but he recovered immediately and said, since he has something to ask us to cooperate with, then we have to see what it is, and let him in, I believe with my strength. He alone can't make any waves. Conan nodded, then used the paper again to walk away. And Nagato manipulated Pain, told Akatsuki's members to break up, let them leave the central tower, and waited for Conan to bring Lei Luo in. The Land of Rain, the entrance to a Megakure village. Conan appeared in front of Lei Luo, looked at Lei Luo and said, Lei Luo-kun, the leader has agreed, come with me. Lei Luo is also very confident in his own strength, and he is not worried about cheating. He followed Conan into a Megakure village and walked towards the central tower. Nagato did not meet Lei Luo directly through the main body, and still used the identity of Pain. Pain looked at Lei Luo who walked in with a proud and indifferent look, and asked lightly, are you the Konoha elite Jonin Lei Luo? Lei Luo smiled and replied, yes, I'm Lei Luo. Nagato, are you so careful that you don't even dare to see me with your body? Pain's body is Yahiko, right? Pain didn't change much when he heard Lei Luo's words. Since Lei Luo knew his identity, it was normal to know Yahiko. So Pain said, don't talk about these useless words. Didn't you say you want to cooperate with us Akatsuki? What is the cooperation? Lei Luo opened his mouth and replied, catch the tailed beast. Isn't the purpose of your Akatsuki to capture the 9-tailed beast? It happens that my purpose is too. Pain snorted coldly and said, although I don't know where you got the news, but in order to cooperate, you must have enough strength. Lei Luo smiled slightly and replied, is my strength enough? You will know if you try it. Good. Soon as Pain finished speaking, he shot Lei Luo directly. Shinra Tensai, Almighty Push, sign. Pain's right hand, a strong repulsive force appeared. Lei Luo just wanted to experience the power of the Shinra Tensai, Almighty Push, sign, so he did not evade it. The terrifying repulsion slammed on Lei Luo, and it bounced off and smashed the wall behind him. Is that only the power? Lei Luo patted the dust on his body, stood up, and said disdainfully. Pain looked at Lei Luo's attitude and snorted coldly. Feel the pain. In an instant, all Pain's 6 paths appeared and attacked Lei Luo directly. Judging from the tentative attack just now, Lei Luo's strength should be very strong, but Heavenly Path may not be able to take him down. 5-finger missile. I saw Shiradao raised his hand, and 5 fingers flew out, that is, 5 small missiles, attacking Lei Luo directly. In front of Shiradao is a puppet master, and he has transformed himself into a human puppet. He is good at physical skills and missile attacks. It is a living weapon that can turn into various weapons from all over the body. Lei Luo didn't dare to pick it up hard. When he raised his hand, there were a few laser beams, which directly detonated the 5-finger missile in advance. But Shira Road had already rushed towards Lei Luo after the 5-fingered missile, and punched Lei Luo with a punch. Lei Luo's right hand was empty, and Hiranmaru appeared in his hand, and then Lei Luo swung Hiranmaru to block Shiradao punch. But Pain Six Paths has 6 people, and now that Shiradao makes a move, the others won't stand idly by. Animal Dao is good at psychic arts, as long as they are all types of psychic creatures combined with black sticks by the Animal Dao, they can be summoned and exchanged. I saw his hand seal with both hands on the ground, and the big crab that had been ferocious was summoned. It was the Hell Crab. The summoned Hell Crab spit out a lot of foam, and the surrounding area instantly turned white, and the foam made the ground very slippery, trying to limit Lei Luo's movement. But Lei Luo came directly into the air in a flash, waving his hands. Light bullets and frost blade aura intertwined and rushed towards the Hell Crab. At this moment, a figure stood in front of the Hell Crab and swallowed all Lei Luo's attacks. It was the way of the Hungry Ghost. Pain Six Paths guys are really hard to deal with, it seems that I have to get serious. Lei Luo thought to himself. At this moment, Lei Luo felt a strong suction force, and accidentally fell from the air, and it was Heavenly Path who shot. Lei Luo calmly moved the chakra in his body and entered the form of a big Buddha. Boom! Lei Luo, who fell from the air, turned into a big Buddha and stepped on the ground with both feet, causing the ground to tremble. What kind of power is this? Pain's Rinnegan stared at the big Buddha, Lei Luo, and was shocked. But Pain came back to his senses right away. Maybe Lei Luo is not worth worrying about if he just got bigger. However, Lei Luo still disappointed Pain. The form of the Buddha is not only a bigger size, but an all-round enhancement, especially in physical skills. Konoha Fluid Art. Gang Force Whirlwind. The leg of Lei Luo, who was incarnated as a Buddha, was approved. It was like a battle axe. The Hell Crab and the Hungry Ghost were directly turned into a puddle of flesh under Lei Luo's leg, and the whole ground was cracked. Gap. Buddha Palm. Shockwave. Lei Luo moved the chakra to his hands, and then slapped the Asura Road who had just attacked him. Naturally, Shira Road would not sit still and directly entered the 3-headed and 6-armed mode, then opened the back mechanism and launched a giant missile directly at Lei Luo. But under the shock wave of Lei Luo, the giant missile was directly ground into ashes, and disappeared without an explosion. You can only use this trick. Heavenly Path looked at Lei Luo of Kamui. His heart was ruthless. He activated the chakra in his body, his hands clasped together, and a black chakra ball floated into the sky. Chibaku Tensai, heavenly body bursting from the earth.